There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from thinking too much. It's not the tiredness you feel after a long day of work or physical effort. It's deeper than that. A fatigue that settles into your bones, that makes your chest feel heavy, that turns simple decisions into mountains you can't seem to climb. If you've ever found yourself replaying the same conversation for the 100th time, or lying awake constructing elaborate scenarios about things that haven't happened and probably never will, you know this exhaustion intimately. You might wonder why your mind does this, why it insists on circling back to the same thoughts, rehashing the same worries, spinning the same stories. It can feel like betrayal, your own mind working against you, refusing to give you peace when all you want is quiet. But here's what's important to understand. Your mind isn't broken. It's not malfunctioning. In fact, in a strange way, it's trying to protect you. Let me explain. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors lived in a world where vigilance meant survival. The person who noticed the rustling in the grass, who remembered which path led to danger, who stayed alert to threats, that person lived to see another day. Our brains evolved to scan for problems, to anticipate danger, to replay experiences so we could learn from them and avoid future harm. This wasn't overthinking. This was staying alive. Fast forward to today, you're no longer watching for predators in tall grass, but your brain still carries that ancient programming. Except now, instead of physical threats, your mind scans for social dangers, rejection, failure, embarrassment, loss. It replays that awkward comment you made at lunch, not because it enjoys torturing you, but because some deep part of your neural wiring believes that if it analyzes the moment enough, you'll never make that mistake again. You'll be safe. The problem is, this strategy worked beautifully for concrete physical threats. If you touched fire and got burned, remembering that pain helped you avoid fire in the future. But emotional and social situations are infinitely more complex. There's rarely one clear lesson, one obvious solution. And so your mind keeps searching, keeps analyzing, keeps trying to find the answer that will finally make you feel secure. This is where overthinking is born, in the gap between your brain's survival instincts and the ambiguous, uncertain nature of modern life. Consider uncertainty for a moment. It's perhaps the most uncomfortable feeling humans experience. Not knowing what will happen, not being able to predict or control outcomes, this triggers something primal in us. And when we can't find certainty in the external world, we often turn inward, trying to think our way to solid ground. If I can just figure this out, we tell ourselves, if I can just understand why they said that, or predict what might happen, or analyze every angle, then I'll feel better. But here's the paradox. The more you think, the more uncertain you often become. Each thought branches into another possibility, another worry, another what if. The mental loop tightens. There's another layer to this, one that's harder to see but just as important. Overthinking often serves as a shield against feeling. When you're caught in your head, analyzing and strategizing and replaying, you're not fully present with the emotions moving through your body. Sadness, disappointment, fear, grief, these feelings can be overwhelming. Thinking about them feels safer than actually feeling them. Your mind becomes a refuge, even when that refuge has become a prison. I once knew someone, let's call her Maya, who would spend hours every evening mentally reviewing her workday. She'd replay conversations with her boss, analyzing tone and body language, trying to determine if she was valued, if her job was secure, if she'd said the right things. She believed this mental review was productive, that she was learning and improving. But what she was actually doing was avoiding the vulnerability of not knowing. The anxiety of uncertainty felt unbearable, so she tried to think her way to safety. What Maya didn't realize was that beneath all that analysis was a simpler truth. She was afraid of not being enough, of losing what she'd worked hard to build, of being exposed as somehow inadequate. The overthinking wasn't solving these fears, it was postponing the moment when she'd have to sit with them. If you're someone who overthinks, there's a good chance you're also someone who feels deeply. You might be intelligent, perceptive, attuned to nuance and detail. These are gifts, but they can also amplify the tendency toward mental loops. You notice more, you sense more, you pick up on subtleties that others miss. Your mind is like a high-definition camera in a world where most people see through a softer lens. This sensitivity is part of what makes you who you are, but it also means your brain has more data to process, more threads to follow, more possibilities to consider. There's one more piece to this puzzle: the modern world itself. You live in an era of unprecedented information, constant connectivity, and endless comparison. Your brain receives more stimulation in a single day than your ancestors experienced in months. Social media shows you curated versions of thousands of lives, inviting constant evaluation. Am I doing enough? Am I living right? Do I measure up? The noise is relentless, and your brain tries to process it all, to make sense of it all, to find your place in it. Is it any wonder your thoughts won't stop? Understanding why your mind does this doesn't make it stop immediately, but it does something equally important. It helps you meet yourself with compassion instead of frustration. Your overthinking isn't a character flaw. It's a response to being human in a complex world, filtered through a brain that's trying its best to keep you safe with tools designed for a different kind of danger. The path forward isn't about forcing your mind to be quiet. It's about developing a new relationship with your thoughts, one where you can observe them without being consumed by them, where you can acknowledge uncertainty without needing to eliminate it, where you can feel emotions without fearing they'll destroy you. This journey begins with simple awareness. Exercise, the thought inventory. For the next 3 days, I want you to practice noticing your thoughts without judgment. You don't need to change them or stop them, just notice. Set aside 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening. Sit somewhere quiet, take a few slow breaths, then simply observe what thoughts arise. You might notice, I'm thinking about tomorrow's meeting, I'm replaying what I said earlier, I'm worried about that text I sent, I'm planning what I need to do. Write down 3 to 5 thoughts each time, not to analyze them, just to see them clearly. Notice if certain thoughts repeat. Notice if particular themes emerge. Worry about the future, regret about the past, concern about others' opinions. This is not about fixing anything yet. It's about becoming aware, because you cannot change what you cannot see. And right now, your thoughts might feel like a rushing river that carries you along. This exercise helps you step onto the bank and simply watch the water flow. That's where change begins, in the quiet act of witnessing. Chapter 2. The Anatomy of a Mental Loop. You've probably noticed that overthinking has a certain shape to it. It's not random mental wandering. It's more like a track that your mind runs on, circling back to the same stations again and again. You might start thinking about one thing, a comment someone made, a decision you need to make, a worry about the future, and before you know it, you're deep in familiar territory, replaying scenes you've already analyzed 100 times. This is what we call a mental loop, and understanding its structure is like learning to read a map of your own mind. Once you can see the pattern, you're no longer quite as lost in it. Let's start with what actually happens in your brain when a loop takes hold. When you think a thought, your brain creates a neural pathway. Imagine it like a footpath through grass. The first time you think it, the path is faint. But when you think the same thought repeatedly, you're walking that same path over and over. The grass wears away, the dirt becomes packed, and eventually you have a well-worn trail. Your brain, efficient as it is, starts to favor this path because it's familiar, easy, and requires less energy than forging a new route. This is why the same thoughts return so easily. You've trained your brain to follow these particular tracks. It's not a failing, it's actually how learning works. The problem is that you've learned patterns that no longer serve you. Now, here's where it gets more complex. Thoughts don't exist in isolation. They create emotional states, and those emotional states generate more thoughts, which intensify the emotions, which produce more thoughts. It becomes a feedback loop, each element feeding the other. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Imagine you're at work and your supervisor sends you an email that says, "Can we talk later today?" 5 words, neutral on the surface, but your mind immediately engages. What does this mean? Did I do something wrong? Are they unhappy with my work? These thoughts trigger anxiety, a tightness in their chest, a quickening of your pulse. The anxiety then generates more thoughts. Maybe they're going to let me go. I should have worked harder on that project. I knew I wasn't good enough. The anxiety intensifies. More thoughts arise. The loop spins faster. What began as neutral information, a simple request for a conversation, has become a full-scale mental emergency, all within the space of your own mind. And here's what makes loops so convincing. The emotional intensity feels like proof. Your racing heart, your churning stomach, the sense of dread. Surely these physical sensations mean something is truly wrong. Your mind interprets these signals as evidence that your catastrophic thoughts are accurate. But emotions aren't facts, they're responses, often to your thoughts rather than to reality itself. This is the crucial distinction that most people miss. There's a profound difference between productive reflection and destructive repetition. Productive reflection moves forward. It processes information, reaches a conclusion or decision, and then releases. It has a beginning, middle, and end. You think about something, you gain insight or make a choice, and you move on. Destructive repetition, on the other hand, circles endlessly without arriving anywhere. You review the same evidence, reach the same dead ends, feel the same feelings, and then start again. There's no resolution because there's no new information. You're just retracing steps you've already taken. It's the difference between taking a walk with a destination and pacing in a small room. How can you tell which one you're doing? Ask yourself, is this thinking producing new understanding, or am I just rehearsing what I already know? Am I moving toward clarity, or am I stuck in repetition? There's a character in these mental loops that deserves special attention, the inner critic. This is the voice that narrates your experience with judgment, that interprets events through the lens of your inadequacy, that catastrophizes and condemns. Everyone has this voice to some degree, but for chronic overthinkers, it's often relentless. The inner critic sounds different for different people, but it shares common themes. You always mess things up. You should have known better. Everyone else has it figured out except you. You're not smart enough, capable enough, worthy enough. This voice often masquerades as protection. I'm just trying to help you avoid failure. But what it actually does is keep you trapped in loops of self-doubt and second-guessing. The inner critic loves catastrophic thinking, which is the practice of taking one concern and expanding it to its worst possible conclusion. You make a small mistake, and the critic says, "This will ruin everything. You'll lose your job. You'll end up alone and unsuccessful." One awkward social interaction becomes proof that no one likes you. One rejection means you'll never find love. Human minds have a strange talent for this kind of extrapolation. Psychologists call it catastrophizing, but it's really just your brain trying to prepare for worst-case scenarios. The problem is that most worst-case scenarios never materialize, and the mental energy spent preparing for them is exhausting and ultimately wasteful. Here's something that might surprise you. Mental loops often feel productive. There's a sense of urgency to them, a feeling that the thinking is necessary and important. Your mind tells you, if I can just figure this out, if I can just understand it completely, then I can rest. So you keep thinking, believing you're working toward something, making progress, solving the problem. But you're not. You're mistaking mental activity for meaningful action. It's like running on a treadmill and believing you're traveling somewhere. There's motion, there's effort, there's even exhaustion, but you haven't actually moved. This illusion of productivity is one of the reasons loops are so hard to break. They feel important. They feel like they matter. Your brain has convinced you that this thinking is essential, that stopping would be irresponsible or dangerous. But what's actually happening is that you're spending precious mental energy on repetitive patterns that create anxiety without creating solutions. Let me tell you about David, someone who came to understand his own loops through careful observation.
David would spend his evenings mentally reviewing interactions from his day, what he said, how people responded, and what he should have done differently. He believed he was learning from experience, becoming better at navigating social situations, but over time he noticed something. Despite all this mental review, his confidence wasn't growing. In fact, he was becoming more anxious in social settings, more self-conscious, more hesitant. What David eventually realized was that his review sessions weren't actually about learning, they were about trying to achieve a retroactive perfection that was impossible. He was stuck in a loop of regret and revision, mentally rewriting history to avoid the discomfort of having been imperfect in the moment. The more he thought, the more inadequate he felt. The loop fed itself.
The breakthrough for David came when he started to notice the pattern itself, to see that he was replaying the same type of thoughts in the same way night after night without ever reaching resolution. That awareness didn't immediately stop the loop, but it created enough space for him to begin questioning whether this thinking was actually helpful. This is what understanding the anatomy of a loop gives you, the ability to see the mechanism clearly enough that you're no longer completely identified with it. You begin to recognize, oh, this is the loop, this is the pattern running again. And in that recognition, something shifts. You're no longer entirely consumed by the content of the thoughts. You're also aware of the structure, the repetitive nature, the familiar track your mind is following. The loop loses some of its power when you can see it for what it is, not truth, not insight, not productive problem solving, but a habitual pattern your brain has learned to run. And here's the most important thing to understand. These loops are maintained by your attention. Your focus is what keeps them alive. When you engage with repetitive thoughts, when you take them seriously and try to solve them, you're feeding the loop. You're reinforcing the neural pathway, making it stronger and more automatic. But when you learn to observe without engaging, when you can notice the thought without following it down the familiar track, the loop begins to weaken. The pathway gets less traffic. The grass begins to grow back over the trail. This doesn't happen overnight. Your loops have been forming for years, maybe decades. They won't disappear because you understand them intellectually, but understanding is the essential first step. You cannot change what you cannot see. Exercise. Mapping your loop. This week, I want you to become a researcher of your own mind. When you notice yourself caught in repetitive thinking, don't try to stop it. Instead, observe it with curiosity. Take out a piece of paper or open a note on your phone, write down the answers to these questions. What is the triggering thought or event? What started this loop? Was it something someone said, something you remembered, a worry about the future? What thoughts follow? List 3 to 5 thoughts that typically arise once the loop begins. Notice if they follow a predictable sequence. What emotions accompany these thoughts? Anxiety, shame, sadness, anger? Notice where you feel these in your body. Where does your mind usually end up? What conclusion or fear does the loop circle back to? Is there a recurring theme? I'm not good enough. Something bad will happen. I've made a terrible mistake. How long does the loop typically last? Minutes? Hours? Does it return multiple times in a day? Do this for at least 3 different loops over the course of the week. You'll likely discover that you have 2 or 3 primary patterns that your mind returns to repeatedly, even if the surface content seems different. The goal isn't to judge these patterns or to feel bad about having them. The goal is simply to map the territory. Once you know the landscape of your mental loops, you can begin to navigate them differently. You're learning to see the shape of your own mind, and in that seeing, freedom becomes possible. Chapter 3. Breaking the what-if spiral. Of all the forms overthinking takes, perhaps none is more exhausting than the what-if spiral. It's a particular kind of mental loop that pulls you out of the present moment and drops you into an imagined future, usually one filled with problems, failures, and disasters that haven't happened and likely never will. What if I fail? What if they don't like me? What if something goes wrong? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I lose everything? What if I'm not enough? These questions can feel urgent, even responsible. After all, isn't it wise to consider possibilities?
Isn't anticipating problems a form of preparation? The mind offers these justifications easily, and they sound reasonable. But there's a crucial difference between thoughtful planning and anxious spiraling, and learning to recognize that difference can change your relationship with worry entirely. Let's start by understanding what if thinking actually is. Psychologists call it anticipatory anxiety, fear about future events that may or may not happen. Your mind is trying to prepare for threats, scanning the horizon for danger. It's that same survival mechanism we discussed earlier, but now it's focused on a timeline that doesn't exist yet. You're experiencing emotional pain about events that are purely hypothetical. Think about that for a moment. You're suffering now in this present moment because of something that exists only in your imagination. The future hasn't arrived, the feared outcome hasn't occurred, but your body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. Your heart races, your muscles tense, your stomach churns, all in response to a story your mind is telling. This is the peculiar torture of what-if thinking. You're living through disasters that haven't happened, feeling grief for losses you haven't experienced, bracing yourself for impacts that may never come. Here's what makes these spirals so seductive and so difficult to escape. What-if questions feel like they deserve answers. Your mind poses the question, what if I fail, and then immediately begins trying to answer it, to solve it, to create a plan that will prevent it. This seems logical, but here's the trap. What-if questions are unanswerable. They're not actually questions seeking information, they're expressions of anxiety disguised as inquiry. Let me show you what happens when you try to answer them. What if I fail? Your mind asks. You respond, well, I'll work really hard to make sure I don't. But your mind isn't satisfied. But what if you work hard and still fail? So you think harder. Then I'll have a backup plan. Your mind counters, what if the backup plan doesn't work either? You scramble for another answer. Then I'll figure something else out. And your mind delivers the final blow. But what if you can't? Do you see what's happening? Every answer you provide just generates another what if. The question isn't looking for a solution, it's looking for absolute certainty, for a guarantee that you won't experience pain or failure or loss, and that's something you can never provide. Life doesn't offer those guarantees. So you keep answering, keep trying to think your way to safety, and the spiral tightens. Each attempt to resolve the anxiety actually feeds it because you're operating from the premise that the fear is rational and needs to be addressed. You're taking the what if seriously, which signals to your brain that it should take it seriously too. This is fundamentally different from genuine planning. Planning has a specific, concrete focus. I have a presentation next week. I'll prepare slides, practice my delivery, and arrive early to set up. That's planning. It's grounded in reality, has clear action steps, and reaches a natural conclusion. A what-if spiral, on the other hand, sounds like this. What if my presentation goes badly? What if I forget what I'm supposed to say? What if people think I'm incompetent? What if this ruins my reputation? What if I lose my job? What if I can't find another one? Notice how it escalates, how it moves from a specific situation to catastrophic outcomes, how it has no clear endpoint. The distinction is this. Planning identifies actual problems and creates solutions. Spiraling invents hypothetical problems and then obsesses over them. There is a woman I'll call Sarah who lived much of her life in what-if spirals, particularly around her relationships. When she started dating someone new, her mind would immediately jump ahead. What if this doesn't work out? What if I get hurt? What if I invest time and energy and it all falls apart? The fear of future pain was so intense that she often withdrew before giving the relationship a real chance, creating the very abandonment she feared. What Sarah discovered, slowly and with great difficulty, was that her what-if thinking wasn't protecting her from pain, it was preventing her from experiencing connection. She was so busy managing imagined futures that she couldn't be present for the actual relationship unfolding in front of her. The irony was heartbreaking. In trying to avoid potential hurt, she was guaranteeing herself the loneliness she feared most. This is what if thinking costs you, not just peace of mind, but presence itself. When your mind is in the future, constructing scenarios and preparing defenses, you're not actually here. You're missing the moment you're in, the only moment that's real. So how do you break this spiral? The first step is recognizing when thinking has crossed from planning into fear-driven projection. Ask yourself, is this thought about a specific, likely situation I can actually prepare for? Or am I spinning hypothetical scenarios that have no basis in current reality? If your friend hasn't texted you back and you're thinking, I should give them space, maybe they're busy, that's reasonable. If you're thinking, what if they're angry at me? What if I said something wrong? What if they never want to talk to me again? What if I lose all my friends and end up alone? That's a spiral. The second step is the hardest one, and it goes against every instinct your anxious mind has. You have to stop trying to answer the what-if questions. You have to recognize them for what they are, anxiety dressed up as inquiry, and let them pass without engagement. This doesn't mean ignoring real concerns or avoiding genuine problem solving. It means learning to distinguish between productive thinking and mental spinning. When a what-if arises, instead of following it down the rabbit hole, you can simply acknowledge it. That's a what-if thought. That's anxiety talking. And then you redirect your attention. This is where presence becomes your most powerful tool. The spiral pulls you into an imagined future. Presence brings you back to what's actually happening now. And here's the truth that your anxious mind doesn't want you to know. Right now, in this present moment, you're almost always okay. The disaster isn't happening. The feared outcome hasn't materialized. You're here, breathing, alive, managing whatever is actually in front of you. When you notice yourself in a what-if spiral, try this. Pause and look around you. Notice 5 things you can see. Feel your feet on the ground. Take 3 slow breaths. Ask yourself, right now, in this moment, what is actually true? Not what might happen, not what could go wrong, what is actually true right now. This is the practice of returning to reality, of pulling your mind back from its fearful projections and anchoring it in the present. It's simple, but it's not easy. Your mind will resist. It will insist that the worrying is necessary, that you're being irresponsible by not preparing for every possible catastrophe.
But here's what you need to understand. You cannot prepare for every possibility. Life is inherently uncertain. No amount of mental rehearsal will eliminate the possibility of pain, failure, or loss. These are part of being human, and the attempt to avoid all uncertainty doesn't make you safer, it just makes you exhausted. Accepting uncertainty is perhaps the most powerful antidote to what-if thinking. Not embracing uncertainty or celebrating it, but simply accepting it as a fundamental condition of existence. You don't know what will happen tomorrow, next week, next year. You can't control all outcomes. You can't prevent all pain. And somehow, despite this profound uncertainty, you've been managing your whole life. You've faced challenges you never saw coming. You've survived disappointments you thought would destroy you. You figured things out as they arose, not because you had perfectly prepared for them, but because human beings are remarkably resilient and adaptive. The future will bring what it brings. Some of it will be difficult. Some of it will be beautiful. Much of it will be completely different from anything you're currently imagining, and you will handle it. Not because you spent hours now worrying about it, but because when the moment comes, you'll be present for it with all your resources available. This is the freedom waiting on the other side of the what-if spiral, the ability to live in the present moment without constantly bracing for an imagined future, the capacity to say, I don't know what will happen, and that's okay. I'll deal with reality when it arrives, not with the fearful fantasies my mind creates. It's not that you'll never worry again. It's not that you'll achieve some permanent state of fearlessness. It's that you'll develop the skill to recognize what-if thinking when it arises, to see it clearly without being swept away by it, and to choose presence over projection. Exercise, the reality check. The next time you find yourself in a what-if spiral, I want you to do this simple but powerful exercise. It's designed to help you distinguish between actual facts and fear-based projections. Take out a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. On the left side, write facts. On the right side, write fears.
Now, examine the situation you're worried about. On the facts side, write down only what is objectively, verifiably true right now. Not interpretations, not assumptions, not projections, just facts. My boss asked to meet with me. I haven't heard back from my friend. I have a medical test scheduled. On the fears side, write down all the what-ifs and worst-case scenarios your mind is generating. What if I'm getting fired? What if my friend is angry? What if the test shows something terrible? Look at both columns. Notice how short the facts column usually is compared to the fears column. Notice that the fears column is entirely made up of things that haven't happened yet and may never happen. Then, at the bottom of the page, write this question. Right now, in this present moment, am I okay? Usually the answer is yes. Right now, you're okay. You're managing. You're here. The catastrophe exists only in your imagination. This exercise isn't about dismissing real concerns or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about grounding yourself in what's actually true versus what your anxious mind is projecting. It's about reclaiming the present moment from the tyranny of imagined futures. Do this every time you notice yourself spiraling. Over time, you'll develop the capacity to do this mental sorting automatically, to catch yourself in the moment of projection and return to what's real. The present moment is where your life actually happens. Everything else is just a story.
Chapter 4. Grounding your attention. There's a moment that happens when you're caught in overthinking. A moment so brief you might miss it entirely when you have a choice. The thoughts are spinning, the anxiety is building, and somewhere beneath all that mental noise, there's a faint awareness that this isn't helping, that you're lost in your own head. In that moment, you can either continue following the thoughts deeper into the maze, or you can do something radically different. You can come back to your body, to your senses, to the physical reality of this present moment. This is what grounding is, the practice of redirecting your attention from the abstract world of thoughts to the concrete world of immediate sensory experience. It sounds simple, almost too simple to be effective, but there's profound power in this shift because your thoughts can take you anywhere, into the past, into imagined futures, into elaborate scenarios that don't exist. But your body is only ever here, now. And where your body is, that's where your life is actually happening. Think of your attention like a spotlight. Most of the time when you're overthinking, that spotlight is turned entirely inward, illuminating the theater of your mind, memories, worries, analysis, stories. The rest of the world fades into background noise. You could be sitting in a beautiful park or eating a meal or talking to someone you love, but you're not really there. You're somewhere else entirely, lost in thought. Grounding is the practice of deliberately redirecting that spotlight outward onto the physical world and your sensory experience of it. It's a way of interrupting the mental loops by shifting the channel entirely, from thinking to sensing, from abstract to concrete, from then and when to right now. Let me be clear about something. This isn't about distraction. Distraction is when you try to avoid difficult thoughts or feelings by occupying your mind with something else, scrolling through your phone, binge-watching shows, keeping yourself constantly busy. Distraction is running away. Grounding is arriving. It's the difference between escaping your experience and anchoring yourself in it. When you're grounded, you're not trying to make the thoughts go away or convince yourself everything is fine. You're simply choosing to place your attention somewhere other than the repetitive mental track. And what you'll discover, if you practice this consistently, is that thoughts have much less power when you're not feeding them with your full attention. Let's talk about how this actually works in your brain and nervous system. When you're caught in anxious overthinking, your nervous system is in a state of activation. Your body believes there's a threat and is preparing to respond. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, stress hormones flood your system. This physiological state then reinforces the mental state. Your body's alarm signals tell your brain that yes, there really is something to worry about, which generates more anxious thoughts, which keeps your body in high alert. It's another feedback loop, this time between mind and body. Grounding interrupts this loop from the body's side.
When you deliberately engage your senses and bring your attention to physical sensations, you're sending a signal to your nervous system. There's no immediate threat. I'm safe right now. Your breathing naturally slows. Your muscles begin to release their tension. The alarm bells quiet down. And when your body calms, your mind has an easier time settling too. This is why grounding works when trying to think your way out of anxiety doesn't. You can't always change your thoughts through willpower alone, but you can always shift your attention, and attention is the bridge between mind and body, between thought and sensation. So, what does grounding actually look like in practice? It can be remarkably simple. It's noticing the weight of your body in your chair. It's feeling the texture of fabric against your skin. It's listening to the sound of rain or traffic or birds. It's looking at something, really looking, with curiosity and focus, and noticing its colors, its shapes, the way light plays across its surface. The key is full attention, not casual noticing, but deliberate focus. This is why I call it grounding your attention. You're placing your awareness somewhere with intention, like dropping an anchor that holds a boat steady even when the waters are rough. Let me tell you about Marcus, who discovered the power of grounding during a particularly difficult period in his life. He'd been dealing with health anxiety, his mind constantly scanning his body for signs of illness, interpreting every sensation as potential catastrophe. The more he thought about his health, the more anxious he became, and the more physical symptoms he experienced: tightness in his chest, dizziness, difficulty breathing. These symptoms then fueled more anxious thoughts, which kept his body in high alert. It's another feedback loop, this time between mind and body. Grounding interrupts this loop from the body's side. When you deliberately engage your senses and bring your attention to physical sensations, you're sending a signal to your nervous system. There's no immediate threat. I'm safe right now. Your breathing naturally slows. Your muscles begin to release their tension. The alarm bells quiet down. And when your body calms, your mind has an easier time settling too. This is why grounding works when trying to think your way out of anxiety doesn't. You can't always change your thoughts through willpower alone, but you can always shift your attention, and attention is the bridge between mind and body, between thought and sensation. So, what does grounding actually look like in practice? It can be remarkably simple. It's noticing the weight of your body in your chair. It's feeling the texture of fabric against your skin. It's listening to the sound of rain or traffic or birds. It's looking at something, really looking, with curiosity and focus, and noticing its colors, its shapes, the way light plays across its surface. The key is full attention, not casual noticing, but deliberate focus. This is why I call it grounding your attention. You're placing your awareness somewhere with intention, like dropping an anchor that holds a boat steady even when the waters are rough. Let me tell you about Marcus, who discovered the power of grounding during a particularly difficult period in his life. He'd been dealing with health anxiety, his mind constantly scanning his body for signs of illness, interpreting every sensation as potential catastrophe. The more he thought about his health, the more anxious he became, and the more physical symptoms he experienced: tightness in his chest, dizziness, difficulty breathing. These symptoms then fueled more anxious thoughts, which kept his body in high alert. It's another feedback loop, this time between mind and body. Grounding interrupts this loop from the body's side. When you deliberately engage your senses and bring your attention to physical sensations, you're sending a signal to your nervous system. There's no immediate threat. I'm safe right now. Your breathing naturally slows. Your muscles begin to release their tension. The alarm bells quiet down. And when your body calms, your mind has an easier time settling too. This is why grounding works when trying to think your way out of anxiety doesn't. You can't always change your thoughts through willpower alone, but you can always shift your attention, and attention is the bridge between mind and body, between thought and sensation. So, what does grounding actually look like in practice? It can be remarkably simple. It's noticing the weight of your body in your chair. It's feeling the texture of fabric against your skin. It's listening to the sound of rain or traffic or birds. It's looking at something, really looking, with curiosity and focus, and noticing its colors, its shapes, the way light plays across its surface. The key is full attention, not casual noticing, but deliberate focus. This is why I call it grounding your attention. You're placing your awareness somewhere with intention, like dropping an anchor that holds a boat steady even when the waters are rough.
Breath is one of the most accessible grounding anchors you have because it's always with you, always available, and it directly influences your nervous system. But here's what's important to understand. Grounding through breath isn't about controlling your breath or breathing correctly. It's simply about noticing the breath, feeling it as a physical sensation. Where do you feel your breath? Maybe it's the rise and fall of your chest, or the expansion of your belly, or the sensation of air moving through your nostrils. You don't have to change anything, just notice. The breath becomes an anchor point, something you can return your attention to whenever you realize you've been swept away by thought. This practice of returning is key. You'll place your attention on your breath or another sensation, and within seconds, you'll likely find that your mind has wandered back to its concerns. This isn't failure, this is completely normal. The practice isn't about maintaining perfect focus. It's about noticing when you've drifted and gently redirecting your attention back to the anchor, again and again and again. Each time you notice and redirect, you're strengthening a crucial skill, the ability to recognize when you're lost in thought and to make a different choice. You're training your attention like you'd train a muscle, and over time, this becomes easier and more automatic. There's another powerful aspect of grounding that deserves attention, the practice of noticing one thing fully. In our overstimulated world, we're almost never truly focused on just one thing. We're always multitasking, our attention divided among multiple inputs. Even when we think we're paying attention, we're often skimming the surface of experience rather than diving deep into it. Grounding through focused attention on a single object or sensation is a form of training your mind to do what it has forgotten how to do. Be completely present with one thing. This might sound mundane, but it's actually quite profound. When you give your full attention to drinking a cup of tea, you're not thinking about the tea and also planning tomorrow and also replaying yesterday. You're just tasting the tea, feeling its warmth, noticing its flavor and texture. This complete absorption in immediate sensory experience is inherently incompatible with overthinking. You can't simultaneously be fully present with the taste of tea and also ruminating about past mistakes. The mind can only fully attend to one thing at a time. So when you choose to place your attention on direct sensory experience, you're necessarily withdrawing it from the thought streams that have been troubling you. This is why grounding creates such immediate relief. It's not that your problems have gone away or that you've solved anything. It's that for this moment, you've stepped out of the story your mind has been telling and into the direct experience of being alive. And there's a spaciousness in that, a breathing room that wasn't there when you were caught in the mental loops. Physical grounding, actually feeling your body's connection to the earth, can be particularly powerful. This might mean feeling your feet on the floor, really feeling them, noticing the pressure and contact, or placing your hand on a solid surface and feeling its temperature, its texture, its solidity, or even standing outside and literally feeling the ground beneath your feet. These sensations are undeniable and immediate. They anchor you in physical reality in a way that pulls you out of the abstract realm of thought. Your mind might be telling you elaborate stories about danger or inadequacy or disaster, but your feet on the ground are a simple, unchanging fact. They remind you, I am here. I am in my body. This is real. The beauty of grounding practices is that they're always available to you. You don't need special equipment or perfect conditions. Your breath, your senses, your body, these travel with you everywhere. In a meeting where anxiety starts to rise, you can feel your feet on the floor. In a sleepless night when thoughts won't stop, you can place your hand on your chest and feel it rise and fall. In a moment of overwhelm, you can look at something and really see it. These are small acts, quiet acts, but they're powerful because they reconnect you with the present moment, which is the only place where peace actually exists, not in the resolved past or the perfectly managed future, but right here, in this breath, in this sensation, in this moment of aliveness. Exercise. The 5 senses reset. This is a grounding exercise you can do anywhere, anytime, in less than 2 minutes. It's designed to pull you out of mental spirals and into present moment awareness through your senses. When you notice yourself caught in overthinking, pause and work through each of your senses. 5 things you can see. Look around you. Name 5 things you can see right now. Don't just glance, really look at each one. Notice colors, shapes, textures. A lamp, a tree branch out the window, your own hand, a doorway, a shadow on the wall. 4 things you can touch. Bring your attention to physical sensations. The chair supporting you, your clothes against your skin, your feet in your shoes, your hands resting on your lap. Really feel each one. 3 things you can hear. Close your eyes if it helps. What sounds are present? Traffic in the distance, the hum of a refrigerator, your own breathing, the rustle of wind. Don't judge the sounds as good or bad, just notice them. 2 things you can smell. This might be subtle. Maybe it's coffee or soap or fresh air or the scent of your own skin. If you can't identify 2 distinct smells, that's fine. Just notice whatever you can. 1 thing you can taste. Maybe it's the lingering taste of your last meal, or you can take a sip of water and really taste it, or simply notice the taste of your own mouth. As you move through each sense, speak the observations out loud if possible, or name them clearly in your mind. I see the blue wall. I see the picture frame. I see the pattern of light on the floor. When you finish, take 1 deep breath and notice how you feel. You'll likely find that the intensity of your thoughts has decreased, that you feel more present, more here. The thoughts might return, they usually do, but you've proven to yourself that you can interrupt them, that you have a tool to bring yourself back to a present. Practice this exercise multiple times today, even when you're not feeling particularly anxious. The more you practice in calm moments, the more available it will be in difficult ones. You're learning to come home to yourself, to this moment, to the simple fact of your existence right here and right now. And that's where your power lives, not in your ability to control your thoughts, but in your choice to place your attention.
Chapter 5. Calming the nervous system. There's something most people don't realize about overthinking. It doesn't just happen in your head. Your whole body is involved. When your mind races, your body responds. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tense, your breath becomes shallow, your stomach churns. And here's the part that matters most. This isn't just a side effect of anxious thinking. It's part of a continuous loop where your body state influences your thoughts and your thoughts influence your body state. You cannot have a calm mind in an agitated body, and you cannot maintain an agitated mind in a truly calm body. This is why all the cognitive strategies in the world, trying to think differently, challenging your thoughts, reasoning with yourself, often falls short when your nervous system is in a state of high alert. It's like trying to have a rational conversation while alarms are blaring. Your body is sending urgent signals that override your attempts at logical thinking. The alarm system needs to be addressed first. Your nervous system has 2 primary modes, though it's more complex than this simple division suggests. There's the sympathetic state, often called fight or flight, where your body mobilizes resources for perceived threats. Heart rate increases, digestion slows, muscles prepare for action, stress hormones flood your bloodstream. This is an ancient, powerful survival response designed to help you escape danger. Then there's the parasympathetic state, often called rest and digest, where your body recovers, heals, and restores itself. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, digestion resumes, muscles release tension. This is where you feel safe enough to rest, to think clearly, to connect with others. When you're caught in chronic overthinking, you're often stuck in a partial sympathetic activation. Your body believes there's a threat, even though there's no tiger chasing you, no immediate physical danger. The threat is in your thoughts, the worry about the future, the replaying of past mistakes, the fear of judgment or failure. But your body doesn't distinguish between a physical threat and a psychological one. It responds the same way to both. And here's where the loop tightens. When your body is in this activated state, your brain interprets the physiological signals as confirmation that something is wrong. Your racing heart tells your brain there must be danger. Your shallow breathing suggests you need to stay on high alert. Your tense muscles confirm that you should be prepared to fight or flee. So your mind generates more anxious thoughts, which maintain the body's stress response, which generates more thoughts. The cycle perpetuates itself. This is why calming your nervous system is not optional or supplementary to managing overthinking. It's foundational. You're not trying to relax because it feels nice. You're addressing the physiological foundation that's keeping the mental loops activated. Let's talk about the vagus nerve, because understanding it changes how you approach your own well-being. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body, wandering from your brainstem down through your chest and abdomen, connecting your brain to your heart, lungs, and digestive system. It's the primary pathway of the parasympathetic nervous system, the main communication channel between your body and brain that signals safety and promotes calm. When your vagal tone is high, when your vagus nerve is functioning well, you recover more quickly from stress. You regulate emotions more easily. You think more clearly. Your body is better at recognizing when the threat has passed and returning to a state of calm. When vagal tone is low, you stay activated longer, you feel stressed more easily, and you have a harder time calming down once you're upset. The beautiful thing about the vagus nerve is that you can influence it. You can't control it directly, but you can engage in practices that stimulate it and strengthen your vagal tone over time. This isn't mystical, it's physiology, and it has profound implications for overthinking. Breathing is one of the most direct ways to activate your vagus nerve and shift your nervous system state. But not just any breathing, specifically slow, deep breathing with longer exhales. When you breathe in, your heart rate slightly increases. When you breathe out, your heart rate slightly decreases. This is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it's mediated by the vagus nerve. When you deliberately extend your exhale, making it longer than your inhale, you're essentially sending a signal to your brain through the vagus nerve that says, "We're safe, we can rest." Your parasympathetic nervous system activates. Your body begins to shift out of the stress response. This isn't about forcing yourself to breathe deeply all the time or breathing in some complicated pattern. It's about occasionally, throughout your day, taking a few moments to breathe slowly and consciously, with particular attention to fully exhaling. Even 3 or 4 breaths like this can begin to shift your state. Let me tell you about Elena, who spent years trying to manage her anxiety through thought alone. She would try to rationalize away her worries, to convince herself logically that everything was fine. Sometimes this worked temporarily, but the anxiety always returned, often stronger than before. She felt like she was fighting a losing battle with her own mind. What changed for Elena was discovering that her chronic overthinking wasn't just a mental habit, it was connected to a nervous system that had been running on high alert for so long that it had forgotten to fully rest. Her body was perpetually tense, her sleep was poor, her digestion was troubled. These weren't separate problems from her anxiety, they were all part of the same dysregulated nervous system. Elena began incorporating simple practices specifically aimed at calming her nervous system: gentle movement, conscious breathing, time in nature, reducing stimulation in the evenings. She didn't do these things instead of addressing her thoughts, she did them as the foundation that made addressing her thoughts actually possible. And gradually, she noticed something remarkable. As her body learned to feel safer, her mind naturally generated fewer catastrophic thoughts. The overthinking decreased not because she fought it harder, but because the physiological foundation that was maintaining it began to change. This is what many people miss. You're not trying to force your mind to be quiet while your body remains in a state of activation.
You're teaching your body that it's safe to rest, and as your body settles, your mind naturally follows. Chronic stress, the kind that comes from ongoing worry, overwork, constant stimulation, and relentless mental activity, keeps your nervous system in a state of hypervigilance. You're always scanning for threats, always prepared for problems, never fully at ease. Over time, this becomes your baseline. You forget what genuine relaxation feels like. You might think you're relaxing when you're scrolling through your phone or watching television, but your nervous system is still activated, still processing information, still on alert. True rest, the kind that allows your nervous system to genuinely recover, requires something different. It requires periods of low stimulation, of not doing, of allowing a system to discharge the accumulated stress and return to equilibrium. This isn't lazy or indulgent, it's neurologically necessary. Your nervous system needs regular opportunities to complete the stress cycle. In nature, when an animal experiences a threat, say a deer being chased by a predator, its sympathetic nervous system activates fully. If the deer escapes, it will often shake or tremble, discharging the stress energy. Then it returns to grazing, fully calm. The cycle completes. Humans often don't complete this cycle. We experience stress, a difficult meeting, a conflict, worrying news, and our body activates. But then we sit still, we suppress the energy, we jump to the next task. The stress energy remains in our system, accumulating over time. Our body never gets the signal that the threat is over, that it's safe to fully relax. This is why movement can be so powerful for calming your nervous system. Not intense, punishing exercise, but gentle, rhythmic movement that allows stress energy to discharge. Walking, stretching, dancing, yoga, swimming, movement that feels good in your body and allows tension to release. When you move, you're completing cycles that your nervous system needs to complete.
There are simple somatic practices, body-based practices that signal safety directly to your nervous system. Placing your hand on your heart and breathing slowly. Gentle self-massage of your neck, shoulders, or scalp. Rocking slightly, the way you might soothe a child. Humming or singing, which directly stimulates the vagus nerve through vibration in your throat. These might seem too simple to matter, but they work at a level deeper than thought, communicating directly with the part of your brain that regulates your stress response. Temperature can also shift your nervous system state. Cold water on your face, for instance, triggers what's called the diving reflex. Your heart rate slows, your parasympathetic nervous system activates. A warm bath or shower can signal safety and relaxation. These aren't just pleasant sensations, they're physiological interventions that change your nervous system state. And then there's connection. Safe, warm connection with another person is one of the most powerful regulators of the nervous system. This is called co-regulation. When you're with someone who is calm and present, their nervous system can help regulate yours. This happens through subtle cues, tone of voice, facial expressions, the rhythm of breath, physical proximity. It's why a hug from someone you trust can instantly ease anxiety in a way that reasoning with yourself cannot. Even in the absence of another person, you can offer yourself this kind of regulation. Speaking to yourself in a kind, gentle tone, placing a hand on your own body in a gesture of comfort, imagining someone who loves you speaking words of reassurance. These aren't mere techniques, they're ways of providing your nervous system with the signals it needs to feel safe. Sleep is another crucial element that often gets overlooked when we talk about overthinking. When you're sleep deprived, your nervous system has fewer resources for regulation, your threshold for stress is lower, your ability to manage difficult emotions decreases, and your mind is more likely to spiral into anxious thinking. The relationship goes both ways. Overthinking disrupts sleep, and poor sleep fuels overthinking. Creating conditions for better sleep isn't just about sleep hygiene tips. It's about recognizing that sleep is when your nervous system does essential restoration work. Protecting your sleep means dimming lights in the evening, reducing stimulation before bed, keeping your bedroom cool and dark, and creating a buffer between your day's activities and sleep time.
These aren't luxuries, they're necessities for a nervous system that can regulate itself effectively. Throughout your day, you have countless opportunities to either activate or calm your nervous system. Every choice matters. The constant checking of news and social media, activation, the time spent in nature, calming, the rushed, shallow breathing while working, activation, the few moments of slow, conscious breathing, calming, the continuous stimulation, activation, the intentional pause, calming. You're not aiming for a life without stress or challenge. That's neither possible nor desirable. You're aiming for a nervous system that can flex into activation when needed and then return to rest when the challenge passes. You're building resilience, the capacity to respond to stress and then recover from it, rather than remaining perpetually activated. This recovery, this return to rest, is where healing happens. It's where your body repairs itself, where your mind processes and integrates experience, where your emotional resources replenish themselves. Without it, you're constantly depleting yourself, running on reserves that never get restored. The invitation here is to treat your nervous system with the same care you'd give to something precious, because it is. It's the foundation of your mental health, your emotional well-being, your capacity to think clearly and respond to life's challenges with presence rather than panic. Exercise, the body scan for safety. This is a gentle practice to help your nervous system recognize safety and release accumulated tension. You can do this lying down, sitting, or even standing. It takes about 5 to 7 minutes. Begin by finding a comfortable position. Close your eyes if that feels safe, or soften your gaze toward the ground. Take 3 slow breaths, making your exhale longer than your inhale. With each exhale, imagine releasing a little bit of the tension you've been carrying. Now, bring your attention to your feet. Without trying to change anything, just notice the sensations there: warmth or coolness, tingling or pressure, tension or ease. Spend about 30 seconds just feeling your feet. Then, as you exhale, imagine any tension in your feet softening and releasing. Move your attention to your lower legs and knees. Notice whatever sensations are present. Breathe with them. On your exhale, allow softening. Continue moving slowly up your body, thighs and hips, noticing, breathing, allowing, your lower back and belly, your chest and upper back. Each time, you're not forcing anything, you're simply bringing gentle awareness and allowing your body to release what it's ready to release. Move to your shoulders, often a place where we hold tremendous tension. Notice how they feel. As you exhale, imagine your shoulders dropping slightly, softening, releasing their grip. Notice your arms, your hands, your neck and throat, your jaw, often clenched without us realizing, your face, your forehead, even your scalp. Finally, take a moment to notice your whole body at once. Notice that you are breathing, that your heart is beating, that your body is supporting you without you having to consciously direct it. Place a hand on your heart or your belly and feel that rhythm, the evidence of your own aliveness. Say to yourself, silently or aloud, "I am safe right now. I can rest." Even if you don't fully believe it, offer these words to your nervous system as an invitation. Stay here for another minute or two, breathing slowly, feeling your body, allowing rest. When you're ready, slowly open your eyes or lift your gaze. Notice how you feel. You might feel calmer, or you might feel emotions rising as tension releases. Both are okay. You're teaching your body that it's safe to let go. Do this practice daily if possible, especially in the evening before sleep. Over time, your nervous system will learn that it doesn't have to remain on high alert constantly, that rest is available, that you are safe enough to soften.
Chapter 6. Rewriting the Inner Narrative. Every person carries stories about themselves, not the stories of what happened to them, but the stories about what those events mean, about who they are because of them. These narratives run quietly in the background of your mind, so familiar you might not even notice them anymore. They sound like truth because you've been telling them for so long. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I'm too much for people. I don't belong. I'm not smart enough. I can't trust myself. I'm a burden. I'm broken. These aren't objective facts about you, they're interpretations, conclusions you drew at some point, often long ago, and then reinforced through repetition until they became the lens through which you see yourself and your life. And here's what makes these narratives so powerful. They don't just describe your experience, they shape it. They influence how you interpret events, what you notice and what you overlook, what you believe is possible for you. If you believe you always mess things up, you'll notice and remember every mistake while discounting your successes as flukes or luck. If you believe people find you too much, you'll interpret neutral responses as rejection and constantly monitor yourself for signs that you're overwhelming others. Your narrative becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, not because it's true, but because it directs your attention and shapes your behavior in ways that confirm it. This is the hidden mechanism behind so much overthinking. You're not just thinking about situations, you're thinking about them through the filter of a story that may not even be accurate. And that story generates specific kinds of thoughts, specific worries and fears and interpretations. Let's look at how these narratives form in the first place. They usually originate in experiences, particularly early ones, where you drew conclusions about yourself in order to make sense of what was happening. Maybe you were criticized repeatedly as a child and concluded, "I'm not good enough." Maybe a parent was emotionally unavailable and you decided, "I'm not worthy of love." Maybe you were bullied and determined, "There's something wrong with me." Maybe you faced failure at a crucial moment and declared, "I can't trust myself." These conclusions made sense at the time. They were a child's attempt to understand a confusing or painful reality. The problem is that they often became fixed, permanent verdicts about who you are when they should have remained temporary observations about specific situations. A child who's told they're too loud might conclude, "I'm too much." An adult with perspective might recognize that particular adult was overwhelmed and couldn't handle my natural energy. Do you see the difference? One is a declaration about your essential nature. The other is an observation about a specific interaction with a specific person in a specific context. But children don't have that perspective. They personalize, they globalize, they make permanent what should be temporary, and then they carry those narratives into adulthood, where they continue to operate unconsciously, generating thoughts and feelings that seem to arise from nowhere but are actually emerging from these old, unexamined stories. Here's what's crucial to understand. A thought is not the same thing as the truth. Just because you think something doesn't make it accurate or real. Your mind generates thousands of thoughts each day, and many of them are simply reflexive outputs based on conditioning, past experiences, and habitual patterns. They're more like weather passing through than objective facts about reality. When a thought arises that says, "I'm going to fail," that's not a prediction or a truth. It's a thought, likely connected to a narrative you've been carrying about your capabilities. When you think, "Nobody really likes me," that's not reality. It's a thought, probably rooted in old conclusions about your worthiness of connection. This distinction matters tremendously. When you believe your thoughts are facts, you're at their mercy. When you recognize them as mental events that may or may not be accurate, you create space to question them, to choose which ones to believe and act on. Psychologists call certain thought patterns cognitive distortions, systematic ways of thinking that are inaccurate and usually negative. You've likely engaged in many of these without realizing it. All or nothing thinking. If it's not perfect, it's worthless. Overgeneralization. One negative event means everything always goes wrong.
mental filtering, focusing on the negative while ignoring the positive, jumping to conclusions, assuming you know what others think or that disaster is inevitable. These distortions aren't character flaws, they're habits of mind, often connected to the narratives you've been carrying, and like any habit, they can be recognized and changed. Let me tell you about James, who spent most of his adult life believing he was fundamentally unlikable. This narrative had roots in his adolescence, when he'd been socially awkward and often excluded. The story, he told himself, was simple and devastating. There's something wrong with me that makes people not want to be around me. As an adult, he had friends, colleagues who enjoyed working with him, even romantic relationships. But none of this contradictory evidence touched the core narrative. When friendships went well, he attributed it to the other person's kindness or patience. When a relationship ended, it confirmed what he'd always known. He was too much or not enough or somehow defective. The breakthrough for James came when a therapist asked him a simple question: "Where's your evidence?" Not in a confrontational way, but with genuine curiosity. James started listing proof. Well, in high school, people didn't want to hang out with me, and that one friend stopped talking to me, and my ex said I was too intense. The therapist nodded. And what about the evidence that contradicts this story? What about the friends you have now, the people who seek out your company, the colleagues who specifically request to work with you? James paused. He'd literally never considered this evidence. It didn't fit the narrative, so his mind had dismissed it, minimized it, explained it away. He was stunned to realize that he'd been selectively gathering evidence for a story he'd decided was true decades ago, while completely ignoring everything that suggested a different story might be possible. This is what we all do, to varying degrees. We find evidence for the stories we believe and overlook evidence that contradicts them. We're not lying or being deliberately biased. Our minds genuinely work this way. We see what we're looking for. So how do you begin to rewrite a narrative that's been running for years, maybe decades? It starts with recognition. You have to become aware of the stories you're telling yourself about yourself. This requires a particular kind of attention, not just noticing your thoughts, but noticing the themes, the recurring conclusions, the underlying beliefs that generate specific thought patterns. When you find yourself overthinking a situation, ask, what story am I telling myself about who I am in this situation? Maybe you're anxious about a social event, and beneath the specific worries is a story, I'm awkward, people don't enjoy my company. Maybe you're ruminating about a work project, and underneath is, I'm not competent, I'm going to fail. Once you identify the narrative, you can begin to examine it, not to argue with it or immediately reject it, but to investigate it with curiosity. Is this actually true? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Where did this story come from? Is it possible there's a different story that's equally or more true?
This isn't about forcing positive thinking or replacing negative thoughts with affirmations you don't believe. It's about recognizing that your current narrative is just one interpretation, one way of organizing your experience, and that other interpretations are possible. Consider reframing, taking the same facts and arranging them into a different story. The facts: I've made mistakes in my career. I've had projects that didn't work out. I've received critical feedback. The old narrative: I'm incompetent. I don't belong here. A reframed narrative: I'm learning and growing. I'm willing to take risks. I'm developing through experience. Both narratives use the same facts, but they lead to completely different thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. One generates shame, anxiety, and paralysis. The other generates curiosity, resilience, and continued effort. The most powerful aspect of rewriting your narrative is recognizing that you get to choose how you speak to yourself. You've probably spent years speaking to yourself in ways you would never speak to someone you love, with harshness, criticism, contempt, impatience. The voice of the inner critic has been so loud and so constant that you've come to believe it's simply telling you the truth. But imagine for a moment how you would speak to a good friend who came to you with the same worries and fears you carry. Would you say, "You're right, you are worthless, and everything is hopeless"? Of course not. You'd offer perspective, compassion, encouragement. You'd remind them of their strengths, their past successes, their inherent worthiness. You'd help them see that their current narrative might not be the whole truth. This is what it means to speak to yourself like someone you love, not to lie to yourself or pretend everything is fine when it's not, but to offer yourself the same kindness, patience, and balanced perspective you'd naturally offer to someone you care about. Creating new neural pathways through conscious reframing isn't instant. Your brain has been running the old narrative for so long that it's become a superhighway, fast, automatic, deeply grooved. Creating a new narrative is like forging a new path through forest. At first, it requires tremendous effort and conscious attention. You have to deliberately notice when the old narrative is running and consciously choose a different story. But here's the remarkable thing about neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change and form new connections throughout your life. With repetition, that new path becomes easier to travel. The old pathway, receiving less traffic, begins to fade. The new narrative, repeated with consistency and intention, gradually becomes more automatic. This doesn't mean you'll never have negative thoughts about yourself again. It means those thoughts will have less power, less credibility. You'll recognize them as old patterns rather than truths. You'll have access to alternative stories that feel equally or more true. I want to be clear about something. Rewriting your narrative isn't about creating a story where you're perfect or where nothing is ever your responsibility. It's about creating a story that's accurate, compassionate, and empowering. A story that acknowledges both your struggles and your strengths, that recognizes you're human and therefore imperfect, that holds space for growth without demanding perfection. The story might sound like this: I'm someone who's doing their best with the tools and understanding they have. I've faced difficult things, and I'm still here. I make mistakes, and I learn from them. I'm worthy of love and belonging, not because I've earned it, but because worthiness isn't something that needs to be earned. I'm growing and changing, and that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. This is the kind of narrative that generates different thoughts. When you believe this story about yourself, you're less likely to spiral into catastrophic thinking because you trust your ability to handle challenges. You're less likely to ruminate on mistakes because you see them as part of learning rather than proof of inadequacy. You're less likely to overthink social interactions because you're not constantly trying to prove or defend your worth. The narrative is the foundation. Change the narrative, and the thoughts that arise from it change too. Exercise: the narrative shift. This week, you're going to identify and begin rewriting one core narrative you carry about yourself. Step 1. Identify the narrative. Spend a few minutes reflecting on how you typically think about yourself. What recurring theme appears in your self-talk? Complete this sentence in as many ways as feel true. The story I tell myself about who I am is that I'm blank. You might write several. That's fine. But for this exercise, choose one that feels particularly active in your life right now, one that generates significant overthinking. Step 2. Examine the evidence. Write this narrative at the top of a page. Below it, create 2 columns. Evidence that supports this narrative. List specific experiences or observations that seem to confirm this story. Evidence that contradicts this narrative. List specific experiences or observations that don't fit this story. Push yourself here, because your mind will resist this part because it's looking for confirmation, not contradiction. Notice if one column is significantly longer than the other. Often, we have extensive evidence for our negative narratives because we've been selectively gathering them for years. Step 3. Create an alternative narrative. Using the same facts, the actual events and experiences, write a different story, not a fantasy, but a different interpretation that's equally valid or more accurate. Old narrative: I'm a burden to people. New narrative:
I have needs like all humans, and people who love me want to support me just as I want to support them. Old narrative, I can't trust myself to make good decisions. New narrative, I've made some decisions I regret and many I'm proud of. I'm learning and my judgment is growing with experience. Practice the new story. For the next week, every time you notice the old narrative running, pause and deliberately state the new one, out loud if you're alone or silently if you're not. This will feel unnatural, even false at first. That's normal. You're not trying to believe it perfectly, you're just introducing a new possibility to your mind. With repetition, it will begin to feel more natural and true. You're not denying reality or pretending struggles don't exist. You're choosing a story about those struggles that empowers you rather than diminishes you. You're taking back authorship of your own narrative. The stories you tell yourself about yourself matter. They shape your thoughts, your feelings, your choices, and ultimately your life. You have more power over these stories than you've realized.
Chapter 7. Releasing external pressure. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying everyone else's feelings, opinions, and expectations alongside your own. You're constantly calculating how others might react, anticipating their needs, adjusting yourself to fit what you imagine they want from you. Your mind becomes a theater where you rehearse conversations, predict judgments, and strategize how to manage everyone else's emotional landscape while neglecting your own. This is one of the most common and invisible sources of overthinking. The weight of external pressure that you've internalized so deeply, it feels like your own voice. But it's not. It's the accumulated expectations, real or imagined, of parents, partners, friends, colleagues, society at large. And beneath all of it is usually a single, powerful fear. If I'm not what they need me to be, I'll be rejected, abandoned, or unloved. Let's start by understanding how external expectations become internal pressure. From the time you were very young, you learned that certain behaviors resulted in approval and others resulted in disapproval. This isn't inherently harmful, it's how socialization works. The problem arises when you begin to equate approval with safety, when pleasing others becomes your primary strategy for ensuring you're accepted and valued. Maybe you had a parent whose mood was unpredictable, and you learned to scan constantly for signs of their emotional state, adjusting your own behavior to keep them calm or happy. Maybe you were praised for being easy or no trouble, and you internalized the message that your worth depended on not having needs. Maybe you experienced rejection or abandonment at a crucial time, and you concluded that the way to prevent that pain was to become whatever others needed you to be. These adaptations made sense. They were survival strategies in contexts where you had limited power. A child who learns to attune to a parent's emotions and adjust accordingly is often protecting themselves in the only way they can. The tragedy is when these strategies persist long after they're necessary, when you're still living as though your survival depends on managing everyone else's experience of you. This is where people-pleasing and overthinking become deeply intertwined. People-pleasing isn't really about being nice or generous. It's about managing anxiety through control, specifically trying to control how others perceive you and feel about you. And because you can never truly control another person's thoughts or feelings, this strategy generates endless mental spinning. Did I say the right thing? Are they upset with me? What are they thinking? Should I have done it differently? What if they're angry? What can I do to fix this? These questions circle endlessly because they're fundamentally unanswerable. You cannot know with certainty what someone else thinks or feels. You cannot control their interpretation of your words or actions. You cannot prevent all disappointment or displeasure. But the anxious mind keeps trying, keeps analyzing, keeps searching for the perfect strategy that will guarantee approval and prevent rejection. Let me tell you about Sophia, who spent years caught in this particular trap. She was known as someone reliable, helpful, always there when others needed her. She rarely said no. She adjusted her schedule, her preferences, even her personality depending on who she was with.
She believed this was who she was, someone who cared deeply about others. But beneath the surface, Sophia was drowning. She spent hours replaying conversations, worrying she'd said something wrong, anxiously checking her phone for responses that would reassure her everything was okay. She felt responsible for everyone's feelings and exhausted by the constant emotional labor. Yet she couldn't stop, because stopping felt like risking the rejection she feared most. The turning point came when a close friend gave her feedback that initially devastated her. "Sometimes I don't feel like I know the real you. It's like you're always performing, trying to be what you think I want. I just want you to be yourself." Sophia was stunned. She'd been working so hard to be a good friend, to be accepted and loved. And yet, in trying to be everything for everyone, she'd lost touch with who she actually was. The irony cut deep. Her strategy to prevent rejection was creating the very distance she feared. This is the paradox of external pressure that's been internalized. In trying to secure connection through pleasing and managing, you often prevent genuine connection. Because real connection requires presence, authenticity, and boundaries, the very things that people-pleasing undermines. There's a concept that's essential to understand here: the difference between empathy and absorption. Empathy is the capacity to sense and understand another person's emotional experience while maintaining your own separate sense of self. It's feeling with someone without losing yourself in their feelings. Absorption means taking on another person's emotional state as though it were your own, losing the boundary between their experience and yours. If a friend is anxious, empathy allows you to recognize and care about their anxiety without becoming anxious yourself. Absorption means their anxiety becomes your anxiety, and now you're both drowning. If your partner is disappointed, empathy lets you understand and support them while remaining grounded in your own center. Absorption means their disappointment destabilizes you, and you scramble to fix it so you can feel okay again. When you're absorbing rather than empathizing, you're not actually being more caring or connected, you're losing yourself. And this generates tremendous overthinking as you try to manage emotional states that aren't even yours to manage. Here's a truth that might be uncomfortable. You cannot control how you're perceived. You simply cannot. You can be thoughtful, kind, considerate, and respectful, and someone will still misunderstand you, judge you, or disapprove of you. You can do your absolute best, and someone will still be disappointed. You can try to be perfect, and you will still make mistakes that hurt or frustrate others. This isn't because you're inadequate, it's because other people's perceptions are filtered through their own experiences, wounds, expectations, and narratives. How someone experiences you has as much to do with them as it does with you, maybe more. And you have no control over their internal lens. Accepting this is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means letting go of the illusion of control, the belief that if you just think hard enough and strategize perfectly, you can guarantee approval. Liberating because it means you can stop the exhausting work of trying to manage the unmanageable. You can stop overthinking every interaction, stop replaying every conversation searching for mistakes, stop contorting yourself to fit what you imagine others want. This doesn't mean you stop caring about your impact on others or become selfish and inconsiderate. It means you shift from trying to control their perception to simply being authentic and handling the consequences as they arise. It means you extend consideration and respect, but you release responsibility for their emotional reactions.
Let me be specific about what this looks like in practice. You send a text message and don't receive an immediate response. The old pattern might be, are they mad at me? Did I say something wrong? Should I send another message? What are they thinking? This is trying to control and predict their response. The shift is, I sent the message, they'll respond when they respond. Their timing doesn't necessarily mean anything about how they feel about me. I can't know what's happening for them right now, and that's okay. This is releasing the need to control. Or you set a boundary. You say no to a request, or you express a need, or you disagree with someone. The old pattern, they're probably upset. They think I'm selfish. I should explain more. Maybe I should have just said yes. What if this damages the relationship? This is absorbing imagined disappointment and trying to prevent it. The shift is, I stated my boundary clearly and respectfully. How they feel about that is their experience to have. I can care about their feelings without being responsible for managing them. If they're upset, we can talk about it, but I don't need to prevent all discomfort. This is maintaining your own center while remaining open to connection. Setting internal boundaries around others' emotions is one of the most important practices for releasing external pressure. An internal boundary is a mental and emotional line that distinguishes between what's yours to feel and manage and what's someone else's to feel and manage. When you have strong internal boundaries, you can be present with someone's anger without becoming defensive or absorbing it as your own. You can witness someone's disappointment without immediately trying to fix it. You can care deeply about someone while recognizing that you're not responsible for their happiness. This isn't coldness or detachment, it's the foundation of genuine intimacy. Because when you're not constantly trying to manage and control others' emotional experiences, you can actually be present with them. You can listen without an agenda. You can support without fixing. You can connect authentically rather than performing. There's often deep conditioning around this, especially for those who were taught that their value comes from taking care of others, or that having boundaries is selfish. You might have learned that love means sacrificing your own needs, that saying no makes you a bad person, that disappointing someone is unacceptable. These beliefs create immense pressure and generate relentless overthinking. If you believe you're responsible for everyone's feelings and that disappointing someone is catastrophic, your mind will spin endlessly trying to prevent any possible displeasure. You'll analyze every word, every action, every decision through the lens of how it might affect others and whether you're doing enough. But here's what's actually true. You're allowed to have needs. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to prioritize your own well-being. You're allowed to be imperfect in your relationships. These aren't selfish acts. They're requirements for sustainable connection and for maintaining your own mental health. The people who truly care about you don't need you to be perfect or selfless. They want you to be real. They want to know you, not the carefully managed version you think they need. And healthy relationships have space for both people's needs, both people's boundaries, both people's humanity. When you release the need to manage how you're perceived, something remarkable happens. You become less interesting to your own overthinking mind. So much mental energy was going toward anticipating reactions, managing impressions, and controlling outcomes. When you step back from that exhausting project, there's simply less to obsessively think about. This doesn't happen overnight. The patterns of people-pleasing and over-responsibility often run deep, but each time you notice yourself spinning in anxiety about someone else's potential reaction, you have an opportunity to practice release. To remind yourself, their feelings and reactions are theirs to have and manage. I can be thoughtful and considerate without being responsible for their emotional experience. I release what I cannot control. You can adapt this language to what feels natural for you, but the core message is the same, distinguishing between consideration and control, between empathy and absorption.
Chapter 8. Understanding your emotional triggers. You're going through your day relatively calmly when something happens. A comment, a tone of voice, an unexpected email, a memory that surfaces. And suddenly, your mind is racing. Within seconds, you're caught in a mental loop, analyzing, worrying, replaying. It feels like it came out of nowhere, this sudden surge of anxiety or hurt or anger that launches you into overthinking. But it didn't come from nowhere. Something triggered it. And understanding your triggers, what they are, where they come from, and what they're actually telling you, is essential for breaking free from the overthinking patterns they generate. A trigger is anything that activates a strong emotional response, particularly one that seems disproportionate to the present situation. It's when a small event generates a big reaction, when you're suddenly flooded with feelings that don't quite match what's actually happening right now. And beneath every trigger is usually an unresolved hurt, an unmet need, or an old fear that's been touched. Here's what's important to understand.
Triggers aren't weaknesses or flaws, they're messengers. They're your psyche's way of saying, something here reminds me of something that hurt before. Something about this situation is touching a wound that hasn't fully healed. The problem isn't that you have triggers. Everyone does. The problem is when you don't recognize them for what they are, when you mistake the intensity of the emotional response for evidence that something catastrophic is happening right now. Let's say your partner says they need some time alone. If you had a parent who withdrew affection as punishment, or if you've experienced abandonment in past relationships, this simple, reasonable request might trigger intense anxiety. Your mind immediately spirals. They're pulling away, they're losing interest, this is the beginning of the end, I'm being abandoned again. But what's actually happening in the present moment? Someone you care about is taking care of their need for solitude. That's all. The rest, the catastrophic narrative, the panic, the certainty of impending loss, that's coming from the trigger. That's old pain being activated and projected onto the present situation. This is the crucial distinction: reacting versus responding. A reaction is immediate, automatic, driven by emotion and past conditioning. It bypasses your conscious awareness and reasoning. You're reacting from the triggered state, from the old wound, not from the present reality. A response, on the other hand, involves a pause. It includes awareness of what you're feeling and why. It creates space between the trigger and your action, allowing you to choose how to engage rather than being swept away by the emotional wave. The difference looks like this. Reaction. Your boss sends a vague message asking to talk. You immediately panic, assume you're in trouble, spend hours ruminating about what you might have done wrong, crafting defensive explanations in your mind. Response. Your boss sends a vague message asking to talk. You notice anxiety rising. You recognize this touches your fear of criticism and your past experiences of being reprimanded. You acknowledge the feeling without letting it dictate your interpretation. You respond simply, "Sure, when works for you," and return to what you were doing, dealing with the actual conversation when it happens. The response doesn't eliminate the emotional reaction. You still feel the anxiety, but it doesn't let that feeling take over your mind and create hours of unnecessary suffering about something that hasn't happened and might not be a problem at all. Understanding this distinction requires you to become familiar with your own emotional landscape, to recognize what typically triggers you and what those triggers are really about. This is deep work, but it's also incredibly freeing because when you understand your triggers, they lose much of their power to hijack your mind. Most triggers connect to core emotional needs that all humans share: the need to be valued, to belong, to be safe, to be understood, to have agency, to be accepted. When one of these needs feels threatened, even if the threat is more perceived than real, a trigger activates. Think about the last time you found yourself suddenly caught in intense overthinking. What happened just before? What need might have been touched? Someone canceled plans, need for connection and belonging. Someone criticized your work, need to be valued and competent. Someone made a decision without consulting you, need for agency and respect. Someone seemed distant, need for closeness and security. The overthinking that follows is often your mind's attempt to restore the threatened need, to figure out how to fix the situation, to prevent the pain of that need remaining unmet. But here's what's essential to recognize. The intensity of your response is usually disproportionate because it's not just about this situation. It's about all the times this need has gone unmet, all the ways this wound has been touched before. Let me tell you about Daniel, who discovered this in a way that changed his relationship with his own mind. Daniel would become intensely anxious whenever his girlfriend didn't text him back within what he considered a reasonable time frame. His mind would immediately spiral. She's losing interest, she's met someone else, she doesn't care about me, I'm not important to her. The overthinking was exhausting and was beginning to strain the relationship. His girlfriend, understandably, felt suffocated by his need for constant reassurance. Daniel knew his reaction was excessive, but he couldn't seem to stop it. Through therapy, Daniel began to trace this trigger back to its source. His father had been emotionally unpredictable, sometimes engaged and affectionate, sometimes withdrawn and cold, with no clear pattern Daniel could understand. Young Daniel learned that he couldn't count on connection being there, that it could disappear without warning or reason. He developed what psychologists call an anxious attachment style, where any sign of distance triggers panic about abandonment. Understanding this didn't immediately eliminate Daniel's triggered responses, but it changed something crucial. He could now recognize when he was reacting from that old wound rather than from present reality. When his girlfriend didn't text back quickly, he could notice, this is my abandonment fear being activated. This is the small child in me who couldn't trust that connection would remain. But I'm not that child anymore, and she's not my father. She's probably just busy. This awareness created the pause between trigger and reaction. In that pause, choice became possible. The relationship between triggers and overthinking is direct. When you're triggered, your nervous system activates. Your mind begins searching for threats and solutions, and you enter a state where anxious thinking takes over. The feelings feel urgent and true because they're backed by powerful emotion, but the emotion is often more about the past than the present.
This is why you can't always think your way out of a triggered state. You're trying to use logic and reasoning while your emotional brain is convinced there's a crisis. The thoughts generated in a triggered state are distorted by the emotional intensity. They're not reliable reflections of reality. What works better is learning to recognize and work with the emotion itself. This means feeling it rather than just thinking about it. And this is where many people get stuck, because feeling emotions, especially difficult ones like fear, shame, grief, or anger, can be uncomfortable. It's often easier to stay in your head, analyzing and ruminating, than to drop into your body and actually feel what's there. But here's what happens when you avoid feeling. The emotion doesn't go away. It stays in your system, generating more thoughts, keeping you activated. The only way through is through, actually experiencing the emotion, allowing it to move through your body, letting it complete its natural cycle. When you're triggered, there's usually a core emotion beneath the mental noise. Anxiety often masks fear or vulnerability. Anger often covers hurt or helplessness. Defensiveness often protects shame. The overthinking is a way of keeping these deeper feelings at arm's length, of staying in your head rather than descending into what can feel like an overwhelming emotional experience. But these emotions are not actually overwhelming when you learn how to be with them. They're intense, yes, but they're also temporary. Emotions are meant to move. That's actually what the word emotion suggests: energy in motion. When you allow yourself to feel them without resistance or judgment, they rise, peak, and naturally subside, usually within minutes. The practice of feeling instead of thinking through looks like this. You notice you're triggered. Your mind wants to analyze, why did they say that? What did they mean? What should I do? Instead of following those thoughts, you pause and ask, what am I actually feeling right now? You might notice your chest feels tight, your stomach is churning, your throat feels constricted. Stay with those physical sensations. Breathe into them. You might notice fear or hurt or anger arising. Name it silently. This is fear. This is hurt. Don't try to make it go away or fix it. Just be with it, the way you'd sit with a distressed child, present, allowing, compassionate. This is profoundly different from ruminating about the emotion or the situation that triggered it. You're not thinking about being hurt, you're feeling the hurt. You're not analyzing the fear, you're experiencing it. And in that direct experience, something remarkable happens. The emotion begins to move and shift. The grip loosens, the urgency fades. Creating space between trigger and reaction is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. This space is where your power lives, not the power to control your emotions, but the power to choose how you respond to them. In that pause, you can recognize, I'm triggered. This is big emotion coming from an old place. I can feel this without it consuming me. I can let this move through me without letting it drive my behavior. This space grows with practice.
At first, you might only recognize you were triggered after you've already reacted, after you've sent the anxious text, after you've withdrawn, after you've gotten defensive. That's okay. That recognition is still valuable. Over time, you'll catch yourself sooner, during the reaction or just as it's beginning, and eventually right as the trigger happens. Each time you catch yourself a little earlier, you're rewiring your brain. You're creating new neural pathways that don't automatically go from trigger to reaction. You're building the capacity to stay present with difficult emotions without being swept away by them. Understanding your triggers also means recognizing patterns. You might notice that criticism triggers intense shame for you, or that feeling excluded triggers abandonment panic, or that uncertainty triggers control-seeking behavior. These patterns aren't random. They're connected to your history, your wounds, your deepest fears about yourself and your place in the world. When you know your patterns, you can prepare for them, not to avoid the feelings, but to meet them with awareness and compassion. You can say to yourself, this situation is likely to trigger my fear of rejection. When that happens, I'll probably want to overthink and analyze everything. I can notice that urge and choose to feel the fear instead of spinning in my head about it. This is self-knowledge as power, not the power to never be triggered, but the power to navigate your triggers with increasing skill and grace. Exercise, the emotion decoder. This exercise will help you identify your triggers and understand the emotions and needs beneath them. Step 1. Recall a recent trigger. Think of a time in the past week when you found yourself suddenly caught in intense overthinking. What happened just before the mental spiral began? Write down the situation in 1 or 2 sentences. Example, my friend took a long time to respond to my message. Step 2. Notice the thoughts. What thoughts arose when you were triggered? Write them down without judgment. Example, they're mad at me. They don't want to talk to me. I said something wrong. I'm annoying. Step 3. Identify the core emotion. Beneath those thoughts, what were you actually feeling? Try to name the emotion as specifically as possible, not bad or upset, but fear, shame, hurt, anger, loneliness, etc. Example, fear of rejection, anxiety about losing connection. Step 4. Discover the need. What core need was touched in this situation? What were you needing that felt threatened? Example, I need to feel valued and connected. I need reassurance that the relationship is secure. Step 6. Separate past from present. Ask yourself, is this intensity proportionate to what's actually happening, or is this touching an old wound? Has this need gone unmet in significant ways in your past? Example, this intensity comes from childhood experiences of feeling unimportant. My friend being busy isn't the same as my parents being emotionally unavailable. Step 6. Practice feeling. The next time this trigger arises, try this. Instead of following the overthinking, place your hand on your heart or your belly. Take 3 slow breaths. Say to yourself, I feel emotion. This is touching my need. I can feel this without it overwhelming me. Then simply breathe with the feeling for a few minutes. Notice where you feel it in your body. Let it be there without trying to fix it or figure it out. The feeling will shift and change if you give it space. Do this exercise with several different triggers over the coming week. You'll begin to see patterns, certain core emotions and needs that get activated repeatedly. This isn't about fixing yourself or eliminating triggers. It's about understanding yourself deeply enough that triggers lose their power to completely hijack your mind. You're learning the language your emotions speak, and when you understand that language, you can respond with wisdom rather than simply reacting with fear.
Chapter 9. Returning to mental clarity. There is a quality of mind that most people have experienced at least occasionally, a state where thinking is clear and effortless, where decisions arise naturally without endless deliberation, where you feel grounded in yourself and present in your life. In this state, you're not fighting with your thoughts or drowning in mental noise. There's space, simplicity, a sense of knowing that doesn't require constant analysis. This is clarity,
And one of the most damaging misconceptions about mental clarity is that it's some permanent state of peace where difficult thoughts never arise, where you're always calm and centered, where life's challenges don't touch you. This impossible standard keeps people striving for something that doesn't exist, while overlooking the clarity that's actually available. Real clarity isn't the absence of thoughts. It's not perpetual peace or enlightened detachment. It's something much simpler and more accessible. It's having steady ground beneath you. It's knowing yourself well enough that when thoughts arise, even difficult ones, you don't get completely lost in them. It's being able to distinguish between mental noise and genuine insight. It's trusting yourself to navigate whatever comes without needing to figure out everything in advance. Clarity is less like reaching a destination and more like knowing your way home. You might wander, you might get distracted or confused, but you can find your way back. You have an inner compass that helps you orient yourself when you've drifted into overthinking. One of the greatest obstacles to clarity is complexity, not the natural complexity of life itself, but the unnecessary complexity you add through overthinking, overcommitting, and constant mental and sensory stimulation. Your mind is processing an overwhelming amount of information every single day. Notifications, news, social media, emails, messages, entertainment, endless inputs competing for your attention. Each input requires processing. Each decision, even minor ones, requires mental energy. Each piece of information you consume, each commitment you make, each task you add to your list, all of it occupies space in your mind. And when your mind is crowded with too much, clarity becomes impossible. You can't see clearly through fog, and mental clutter creates exactly that kind of obscuring fog. Simplicity, then, becomes a practice essential to clarity. Not simplicity as deprivation or minimalism as an aesthetic, but simplicity as the deliberate creation of space. Fewer inputs, fewer commitments, fewer decisions, more room for your mind to settle, to process, to simply be. This might mean being more selective about what media you consume, recognizing that every article, podcast, or video you take in is something your mind has to process. It might mean saying no to commitments that don't genuinely matter to you, protecting your time and energy for what does. It might mean reducing the number of decisions you have to make by creating simple routines around recurring choices. Let me tell you about Nina, who realized her mental fog wasn't a personal failing, but a natural consequence of how she was living. She prided herself on being informed, on staying current with news and trends, on being available and responsive to everyone in her life. She listened to podcasts while commuting, scrolled social media during breaks, watched shows while eating, checked email constantly. She said yes to most requests and maintained an impossibly full calendar. Nina felt perpetually overwhelmed, constantly behind, never quite able to think clearly. It didn't occur to her that the problem wasn't her capacity, it was the volume of input and demand she was subjecting herself to. When Nina began experimenting with simplification, choosing one podcast a week instead of consuming them constantly, taking actual breaks without screens, creating mornings without immediately checking her phone, and saying no to several commitments, something remarkable happened. She could think again. Not perfectly, not without any anxiety or confusion, but with more clarity than she'd experienced in years. The space she created allowed her thoughts to settle rather than constantly churning. This is what happens when you reduce the noise. Clarity has room to emerge. Your mind isn't designed to process the volume of information and stimulation that modern life offers. It needs periods of quiet, of low input, of spaciousness. Without these, you're asking your mind to function in a state of constant overload, and then wondering why you can't think clearly. Decision-making is another area where overthinking and clarity intersect powerfully.
When you overthink decisions, you're usually trying to eliminate all uncertainty, to guarantee the right outcome, to avoid any possibility of regret. You gather endless information, analyze every angle, imagine every possible consequence. And ironically, the more you think, the more confused you often become. This is because clarity in decision-making doesn't come from exhaustive analysis. It comes from inner knowing, a sense that often arises quickly and quietly before the analytical mind takes over. You've probably experienced this. You know what you want to do, but then your mind starts generating doubts and alternatives, and soon you're lost in conflicting thoughts, no longer sure of anything. Learning to trust your inner knowing is essential for making decisions without overthinking. This doesn't mean being impulsive or ignoring relevant information. It means gathering the information you genuinely need, checking in with yourself about what feels right, and then deciding, without requiring absolute certainty or a guarantee of the outcome. Your inner knowing speaks quietly. It's not the loudest voice in your head. It's not the one catastrophizing or generating endless what-ifs. It's the calm sense beneath all that noise, the feeling of yes or no that arises when you genuinely check in with yourself. Accessing it requires you to quiet the mental chatter enough to hear it. This is where stillness becomes valuable, not as a goal in itself, but as a practice that creates the conditions for clarity. Stillness might be sitting quietly for a few minutes each day without any input or agenda. It might be walking without listening to anything, just being with your thoughts and letting them settle. It might be lying in bed for a few minutes after waking before reaching for your phone, allowing your mind to transition into the day gradually rather than immediately flooding it with information. These moments of stillness feel unproductive to the achievement-oriented mind. You're not doing anything, not accomplishing anything, not consuming anything. But this is precisely why they're valuable. In stillness, your mind processes what it's been holding, integrates experiences, makes connections you couldn't see in the midst of activity. Clarity often emerges in these quiet spaces, not in the frantic searching for it. Boredom deserves special mention here because it's become almost extinct in modern life. The moment you feel bored, you reach for your phone, turn on something to watch, find something to do. But boredom, the state of having nothing particular to occupy your attention, is actually fertile ground for clarity. It's in boredom that your mind wanders, makes unexpected connections, generates creative insights, processes emotions. Children understand this instinctively. When a child is bored, they eventually create something, a game, a story, an exploration. Adults have often lost this capacity, filling every potential moment of boredom with external stimulation, and in doing so, they've eliminated one of the natural conditions that allows clarity and creativity to emerge. What if, instead of treating boredom as a problem to immediately solve, you allowed it? What if you sat with the restless feeling, resisted the urge to fill it, and waited to see what emerges on the other side? You might be surprised by what your mind offers when it's not being constantly directed and stimulated.
Single tasking is another powerful practice for cultivating clarity. You've probably noticed that when you try to do multiple things at once, responding to messages while working, eating while scrolling, talking to someone while thinking about something else, you don't do any of them well, and you certainly don't feel clear. Your attention is fragmented, your mind scattered. Single tasking is the practice of doing one thing at a time with your full attention. When you're eating, tasting the food, noticing textures and flavors, being present with the experience. When you're working, focused on the task at hand without constant interruptions. When you're with someone, you're actually there, listening, engaging, not partially occupied with your phone or your to-do list. This isn't about perfection. Your mind will wander. You'll get distracted. That's normal. The practice is noticing when you fragmented your attention and bringing it back to one thing. Each time you do this, you're strengthening your capacity for focused attention, which is the foundation of clear thinking.
Mental hygiene, the regular practices that keep your mind clear, matters just as much as physical hygiene. You wouldn't go weeks without showering and expect to feel fresh. Similarly, you can't go indefinitely without tending to your mental state and expect to maintain clarity. Mental hygiene might include regular time in nature, which has been shown to reduce mental fatigue and restore attention, physical movement that allows stress to discharge and thoughts to settle, adequate sleep, which is when your brain literally cleans itself, clearing out metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours, time with people who help you feel grounded rather than activated, activities that engage you fully and create flow states where overthinking naturally quiets. These aren't luxuries or optional additions to your life, they're necessities for mental clarity. And when you neglect them, you pay the price in mental fog, anxiety, and the inability to think clearly. There's also the practice of regular mental clearing, deliberately setting aside time to process what's been accumulating in your mind. This might be journaling, where you write out the thoughts that have been circling, getting them out of your head and onto paper where you can see them more objectively. It might be talking with a trusted friend or therapist, speaking the concerns that have been weighing on you. It might be simply sitting quietly and allowing thoughts to arise and pass without engaging with them, watching your mental weather without getting caught in the storm. When you create regular opportunities for this kind of processing, thoughts don't pile up unexamined. Your mind has a chance to sort through what it's holding, to distinguish what's important from what's noise, to reach conclusions and let go of what's no longer relevant. Clarity also requires knowing what actually matters to you. When you're unclear about your values and priorities, every decision becomes complicated. You have no clear criteria for saying yes or no, no guiding principles to simplify choices. But when you know what matters most, the values you want to live by, the relationships that are central to your life, the work that feels meaningful, decisions become easier. Not always easy, but clearer. You don't have to analyze every opportunity or possibility against an exhaustive list of pros and cons. You can ask simply, does this align with what matters most to me? Does this serve my deeper values? Does this contribute to the life I want to create? These questions cut through much of the mental noise and return you to what's essential. This is clarity as orientation, knowing your true north so you can navigate without constantly questioning every direction. And this kind of clarity comes not from thinking more, but from knowing yourself more deeply. Exercise, the clarity ritual. This is a daily practice designed to create the conditions for mental clarity. Adapt it to fit your life, but commit to some version of it each day this week. Morning, simple beginning, 5 to 10 minutes. Before you check your phone or engage with any input, sit quietly. You might sit on the edge of your bed, in a chair, or on the floor. Take several slow breaths. Ask yourself, what are my priorities today? What truly matters? Not everything you'll do, just the 2 or 3 things that would make today feel aligned and meaningful. Hold these gently in your mind. Then set an intention for how you want to move through your day. Not what you'll accomplish, but how you want to be. Present, patient, grounded, open. Choose one word or phrase. Throughout the day, single-tasking check-ins. 3 times during the day, pause for just 1 minute. Notice, am I doing one thing or am I fragmenting my attention? If fragmented, bring your focus back to one task, one moment, one thing. Evening, mental clearing, 10 to 15 minutes. Before bed, take time to clear what the day has accumulated. You might journal freely for 10 minutes, writing whatever thoughts are circling in your mind. Don't edit or analyze, just let them flow onto the page where you can see them more objectively. You might be sitting quietly and simply watch thoughts arise and pass, like clouds moving across the sky. Don't engage with them, just observe. You might take a slow walk, allowing your mind to wander and settle naturally. The goal isn't to solve anything or reach conclusions, it's to process and release, creating mental space for rest and clarity. Weekly, simplification review. Once this week, look at your calendar, your commitments, your inputs. Ask yourself, what's here that doesn't truly need to be? What commitments could I release? What inputs could I reduce? What could be simpler?
Choose one thing to simplify or release. Maybe it's unsubscribing from email lists that create mental clutter. Maybe it's saying no to a commitment that doesn't align with your priorities. Maybe it's reducing your news consumption by half. Small acts of simplification compound over time, creating increasing spaciousness for clarity. Clarity isn't something you achieve once and maintain forever. It's something you return to again and again through practices that create the conditions for clear thinking. You're not trying to eliminate all confusion or uncertainty from your life. You're learning to navigate with more steadiness, more trust in yourself, more ability to find your way home when you've wandered into the fog of overthinking. The clear mind you're cultivating isn't empty, it's spacious. It's not free from thoughts. It's free to observe thoughts without being consumed by them. It's not untouchable by difficulty. It's capable of meeting difficulty without losing itself. This is the clarity that matters, and it's available to you not in some distant future when you've perfected yourself, but right now, in this moment, when you choose to create the space for it.
Chapter 10. Reclaiming Inner Peace. Peace is not what you think it is. It's not a state of perpetual calm where nothing troubles you, where difficult thoughts never arise, where you float serenely above life's challenges. That version of peace is a fantasy, an impossible standard that keeps you perpetually striving for something that doesn't exist while missing the peace that's actually available. Real peace is something entirely different. It's not the absence of thoughts, it's a different relationship with them. It's not the elimination of difficulty, it's the capacity to remain steady within it. It's not arriving at some final destination where all your problems are solved. It's the practice of returning again and again to a place of groundedness within yourself, no matter what's happening around you or within you. This is what it means to reclaim inner peace, not to achieve a permanent state of tranquility, but to develop the ability to find your center even when life pulls you away from it, to know that you can wander into overthinking, into anxiety, into mental chaos, and still find your way back, to trust that beneath the turbulent surface of your thoughts, there's a deeper stillness that's always present, always accessible. Think of the ocean. On the surface, there are waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, constantly moving. But deeper down, beneath the reach of wind and storm, there's a profound stillness. The waves don't disappear. The ocean is both the surface turbulence and the deep calm simultaneously. You are like this too. Your thoughts and emotions move on the surface, sometimes peacefully, sometimes stormily, but beneath them, there's a fundamental okayness, a core of you that remains steady. The problem is that you've learned to identify entirely with the surface, with the thoughts and feelings that arise and pass. You believe you are the waves, and when the waves are turbulent, you think you are fundamentally disturbed. But you're also the deep water. You're also the awareness that holds all of this. And that awareness is inherently peaceful, not because it's trying to be, but because it simply is. This might sound abstract, so let me make it concrete. You've probably had moments, maybe brief, maybe profound, where you suddenly felt a sense of deep okayness, despite whatever was happening. Maybe it was in nature, or in a moment of connection, or in the middle of a crisis when something in you suddenly stilled and you knew somehow that you would be okay. That experience wasn't manufactured or achieved through effort. It was a glimpse of what's always there beneath the mental noise. The practice of returning to peace is about learning to access that deeper place more reliably, more consciously. It's about recognizing when you've been pulled into the storm of your thoughts and choosing to descend below the surface, to find the stillness that doesn't depend on your thoughts being quiet. This begins with accepting that some thoughts will always come. This is crucial because many people exhaust themselves trying to stop thinking, believing that a peaceful mind is one where thoughts have ceased. But thoughts are what minds do. Trying to stop them entirely is like trying to stop your heart from beating. It's not only impossible, it's missing the point. The shift isn't from thinking to not thinking, it's from being consumed by thoughts to observing them. It's from believing every thought that arises to recognizing that thoughts are mental events that come and go, and you don't have to engage with all of them. Imagine you're sitting by a river, watching leaves float by on the water. Some leaves are beautiful, some are ordinary, some are broken or damaged. You don't have to grab every leaf that passes. You don't have to examine each one, judge it, follow it downstream. You can simply watch them float by, appearing in your field of vision and then disappearing. Your thoughts are like this too. They arise, they exist for a moment, and they pass. The suffering comes not from the thoughts themselves, but from grabbing onto them, following them, believing them, building entire narratives around them. When you learn to let thoughts pass like leaves on a river, you discover a profound peace that exists independent of what thoughts happen to be present. This is not dissociation or detachment. You're not becoming cold or disconnected from life. You're actually becoming more present, more genuinely engaged, because you're not lost in the mental narratives about life. You're actually experiencing life itself. Learning to let thoughts pass requires practice. Your default mode has been to engage with every thought, to take each one seriously, to follow wherever your mind leads. Changing this pattern doesn't happen through force or suppression. It happens through gentle, repeated practice of noticing thoughts and choosing not to follow them. When an anxious thought arises, what if something goes wrong? You can notice it. There's an anxious thought. And then, instead of engaging with it, analyzing it, answering it, you can simply return your attention to the present moment, to your breath, to the sensations in your body, to what's actually here right now. The thought might come again. That's okay. Notice it again. Return again. This isn't failure. This is the practice. You're training your mind like you'd train a puppy that keeps wandering off. You don't punish it or get frustrated with it. You gently, patiently bring it back, again and again. Over time, something remarkable happens. The thoughts don't necessarily decrease in frequency, but they lose their grip on you. They become less compelling, less believable, less able to pull you into hours of rumination. They're just thoughts, mental weather passing through. And you're the spacious sky that holds them without being defined by them. Peace as practice, not destination, means you're never done. You never reach a point where you've permanently conquered overthinking, where you never get anxious or confused or lost in your head again. This isn't a problem to be solved once and for all. It's a practice to return to, continuously, for your entire life. Some days you'll feel clear and grounded. Other days you'll be caught in mental loops and anxiety. Both are normal. Both are part of being human. The practice isn't about having only good days. It's about knowing how to work with any day, knowing how to find your way back to center even when you've been pulled far from it. This is actually deeply liberating. You're not failing when you overthink. You're not broken when you're anxious. You're not regressing when difficult patterns return. You're simply human, having a human experience, and you have tools and practices to navigate that experience with increasing skill and compassion. Building trust in your own resilience is essential to inner peace. So much of your anxiety and overthinking comes from an unconscious belief that you can't handle difficulty, that challenges will overwhelm you, that you need to prepare for and prevent every possible problem. But the truth your life has already proven, is that you're remarkably resilient. Think back over your life. How many things have you faced that you thought you couldn't handle? How many situations that seemed impossible? How many losses, failures, disappointments, challenges? And yet, here you are. You've handled all of it. Not perfectly, who does, but adequately. You've figured things out as they arose. You've survived every difficult day you've had. Your track record for getting through hard things is actually 100%.
This isn't about denying that life can be genuinely difficult or painful. It's about recognizing that you have more capacity than you give yourself credit for. You don't need to mentally rehearse every possible challenge. You don't need to have everything figured out in advance. When difficulty comes, and it will come because that's part of life, you'll meet it. You'll draw on resources you didn't know you had. You'll find your way through, just like you always have. Trusting yourself means trusting this. Trusting that you're more capable than your anxious mind believes. Trusting that you can handle not knowing. Trusting that you can sit with discomfort without needing to immediately fix it or figure it out. Trusting that peace doesn't require perfect circumstances. It's available even in the midst of uncertainty and challenge. Creating a life that supports a calmer mind is also part of reclaiming peace. This isn't about constructing some ideal, stress-free existence. It's about making conscious choices about how you spend your time and energy, about what you allow into your mental and emotional space, about the environments and relationships you cultivate. This might mean protecting your mornings from immediately diving into email and news, creating a buffer where your mind can wake gently. It might mean being selective about which social media you engage with and how much time you spend there. It might mean prioritizing relationships with people who help you feel grounded rather than activated. It might mean creating regular times for the practices that support your well-being: movement, nature, stillness, creativity, connection. These choices might seem small, but they're actually profound. They're how you build a life where peace is possible, where your nervous system isn't constantly activated, where your mind has the space it needs to settle. You're not at the mercy of circumstance. You have agency in creating conditions that support your mental health. There's also courage involved in reclaiming peace, courage that often goes unrecognized. It takes courage to stop fighting with your own mind, to accept your thoughts and feelings rather than constantly battling them. It takes courage to be vulnerable, to admit you don't have everything figured out, to ask for help when you need it. It takes courage to prioritize your well-being, even when others might not understand. It takes courage to change patterns that have been with you for years, even when change feels uncomfortable and uncertain. You are showing this courage right now by doing this work, by being willing to examine your patterns and try something different. That deserves recognition. Change is not easy, and you're choosing it anyway. That's brave. Let me tell you about Grace, who spent years in a particular kind of suffering. She believed peace would come when her life was perfect, when she had the right job, the right relationship, the right body, the right circumstances. She thought peace was something she had to earn through achievement and perfection, so she worked tirelessly, constantly anxious about whether she was doing enough, whether she measured up, whether she was on the right path. The turning point came during a period of illness that forced her to stop. She couldn't work, couldn't exercise, couldn't do much of anything except rest, and in that enforced stillness, stripped of all the ways she usually tried to secure peace through external achievement, something unexpected happened. She found a strange, quiet okayness. Not happiness, she was frustrated and uncomfortable, but a deeper sense that somehow, even in this limitation, even without accomplishing anything, she was okay. This was revolutionary for Grace. She realized that peace wasn't something she had to earn or achieve. It wasn't conditional on her circumstances being perfect. It was available right now, in this imperfect moment, in her imperfect life, in her imperfect self. All the overthinking, all the striving, all the anxiety, it had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding about where peace comes from. Peace doesn't come from your life being a certain way. It comes from your relationship with your life, however it is. It comes from the deep acceptance that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, learning exactly what you need to learn, even when it's difficult. It comes from the recognition that you don't have to have it all figured out. It comes from trusting the process of your own becoming. This is the peace available to you right now, not in some imagined future when you finally conquered overthinking or achieved some perfect state of mental clarity.
Right now, beneath whatever thoughts are present, beneath whatever anxiety or confusion or difficulty you're experiencing, there's a fundamental okayness, not because everything is fine, it might not be, but because you are enough to meet whatever comes. You always have been. The practice of returning is simple. When you notice you've been lost in overthinking, you pause, you take a breath, you feel your body, you look around and notice where you are. You acknowledge, I've been in my head, I'm coming back now, and you return to the present moment, to the only place where life is actually happening, to the only place where peace exists. You'll do this thousands of times. This is the practice, not returning once and staying there forever, but returning again and again. Each return is not a failure, it's the practice itself. Each time you find your way back, you're strengthening your capacity to do so. You're learning the way home. And gradually, over time, something shifts. Not because you've eliminated overthinking, you haven't and you won't entirely, but because you've changed your relationship with it. You've discovered that you are larger than your thoughts, that peace is more fundamental than anxiety, that you can be okay even when your mind is noisy. This is reclaiming inner peace, not as something you lost and must find, but as something you've always had, covered over by layers of thinking and striving and trying to be something other than you are. You're not creating peace, you're removing what obscures it. You're returning to what's always been here, waiting patiently for your return. Exercise, the peace practice. This is your personalized daily anchor, a practice you can return to anytime, anywhere to reconnect with inner peace. The core practice, 3 to 5 minutes, multiple times daily. Find a comfortable position. Close your eyes or soften your gaze. Step 1. Ground. Feel your body where it makes contact with what supports it. Chair, floor, ground. Feel the weight of your body being held. You are supported. Step 2. Breathe. Take 3 slow breaths. Make the exhale longer than the inhale. With each exhale, imagine releasing tension, letting go of whatever you're carrying. Step 3. Notice. Observe what thoughts are present without engaging with them. Simply notice, my mind is thinking about work. My mind is worrying about tomorrow. Let the thoughts be there like clouds in the sky, present but not requiring your engagement. Step 4. Descend. Imagine descending below the surface of your thoughts, like diving below turbulent waves into calm water. Drop your awareness into your body, into the quiet space beneath the mental noise. Rest there for a moment. Step 5. Remember. Say to yourself, silently, beneath these thoughts, I am okay. Beneath this anxiety, there is peace. I am more than my mental weather. I can always return here. Step 6. Return. Open your eyes. Notice one thing you can see, hear, or feel. Return to your life from this place of groundedness. Throughout your day, each time you catch yourself lost in overthinking, use this simple version. Pause. Take one breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Say to yourself, I'm returning. That's all. You're not trying to fix the overthinking or make it go away. You're just returning to yourself, to this moment, to the peace that's always available beneath the noise. Before sleep, as you lie in bed, place your hand on your heart or belly. Feel the rhythm of your breath. Say thank you to yourself for another day of practice, for returning as many times as you needed to, for continuing this journey. This practice is yours. Adapt it. Make it your own. What matters is not doing it perfectly, but doing it, returning again and again to the peace that is your birthright, your true nature, your home. You don't have to fight with your mind anymore. You don't have to fix yourself or overcome some fundamental flaw. You simply have to remember again and again that peace is not something you achieve. It's something you return to, and you can always, always return.
Conclusion. The quiet on the other side. There's a moment that comes, not once, but many times, when you realize you've been sitting peacefully for minutes, maybe longer, without the familiar churn of overthinking. Your mind is present. Your body is relaxed. You're simply here,
in this moment, without the urgent need to figure anything out or prepare for imagined catastrophes. And when you notice this absence of noise, there's a quiet joy in it, a relief so profound it almost makes you want to cry. This is what waits on the other side of the work you've been doing. Not perfection, not the permanent elimination of difficult thoughts, but moments, increasingly frequent moments of genuine peace, spaces of mental quiet, times when you trust yourself enough to simply be without constantly monitoring, analyzing, or preparing. The journey from mental overwhelm to inner steadiness isn't a straight line. You haven't moved from a place of constant chaos to one of permanent calm. Instead, you've learned to navigate the territory of your own mind with more skill, more compassion, more awareness. You've developed the capacity to recognize when you're caught in overthinking and to find your way back to center. And that capacity, that ability to return, is everything. Think about where you started. The exhaustion of thoughts that wouldn't stop. The anxiety that seemed to live in your chest, a constant companion. The feeling of being trapped in your own head, unable to find the exit. The belief, perhaps, that this was just who you were, that you would always struggle this way, that peace was something other people experienced, but not you. And now, look at what you know. You understand why your mind overthinks, not because you're broken, but because you're human, carrying an ancient survival system in a modern world. You can identify the anatomy of your mental loops and recognize when you're caught in repetitive patterns. You can distinguish between genuine concern and anxious projection. You know how to ground yourself in the present moment when fear pulls you into imagined futures. You understand the connection between your nervous system and your thoughts, and you have practices to calm the physiological foundation of anxiety. You've begun to rewrite the narratives you've carried about yourself, recognizing that the stories you tell yourself are not fixed truths, but interpretations you can change. You're learning to release the weight of external expectations, to distinguish between what's genuinely yours and what you've absorbed from others. You understand your emotional triggers, and you're developing the capacity to respond rather than react. You're creating the conditions for mental clarity through simplicity, stillness, and intentional practices. And you're reclaiming inner peace, not as a destination you reach once and remain at forever, but as a place you can return to again and again. This is not small. This is profound transformation, even if it feels gradual. Even if you still have difficult days, even if overthinking hasn't completely disappeared from your life. Because here's what's important to understand. Change is gradual, not instant. You didn't develop these patterns of overthinking overnight, and they won't dissolve overnight either. The neural pathways in your brain that have been running these loops for years don't simply vanish because you've learned new information. They fade with consistent practice, with repeated choosings of different responses, with patient, compassionate repetition of new patterns. There will be days when you feel like you've made no progress at all, when you're caught in the same old spirals, when the anxiety feels as intense as it ever did. These days don't mean you've failed. They don't mean the work you've done doesn't matter. They're simply part of the non-linear process of change. You're not moving in a straight line from broken to fixed. You're spiraling, sometimes closer to center, sometimes further away, but generally, over time, moving toward greater steadiness and peace. Be patient with yourself in this process. Be gentle with the days when overthinking returns in full force. Be compassionate with the moments when you forget everything you've learned and fall back into old patterns. This is all part of it. You're not becoming a different person. You're becoming more fully yourself. And that's perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this journey. The transformation isn't about fixing something wrong with you or becoming someone else entirely. It's about removing the layers of anxiety, fear, and mental noise that have been obscuring who you really are. Beneath the overthinking, beneath the worry and rumination, there's a version of you that's clear, grounded, present, capable, and inherently peaceful.
You're not creating this self, you're uncovering it. Think of it like cleaning a window that's been covered in dust and grime for years. You're not creating the light, it's been there all along. You're simply removing what's been blocking it. With each practice, with each moment of awareness, with each time you choose to return to center instead of following the mental spiral, you're clearing away a little more of what's obscured your natural clarity and peace. Celebrate the small moments of freedom from the loop. The time you noticed a worry arising and chose not to follow it. The conversation you had without replaying it afterward. The decision you made without agonizing over every possible outcome. The morning you woke up and realized your mind felt quiet. The evening you spent present with someone you love instead of lost in your head. The moment you caught yourself in an old pattern and smiled at it with affection instead of frustration. These moments matter immensely. They're not just nice experiences, they're evidence that change is happening, that you're developing new capacities, that peace is accessible to you. Each one is a small victory worth acknowledging, and over time, these moments accumulate. They become more frequent, more familiar, more available. You have everything you need already within you. This is crucial to understand. You're not lacking some essential quality that other people have. You're not missing a piece that you need to find or acquire. All the resources you need for navigating your mind, for managing anxiety, for finding peace, they're already present within you. You've simply been learning to access them, to remember them, to trust them. The practices you've learned aren't about adding something to yourself. It's about removing obstacles, about creating conditions, about remembering what you already know in your deepest self. You already know how to breathe slowly. You already know how to feel your body. You already know how to notice a thought without believing it. You already know how to be kind to yourself. The practices just help you remember to do these things, to do them consciously and consistently. And as you continue this practice, because it is a practice, something you'll return to throughout your life, remember this: peace is not something you find, it's something you return to. It's not out there in some perfect set of circumstances or some future version of yourself. It's here, now, beneath whatever mental weather you're currently experiencing. It's the ground beneath the waves, the stillness beneath the thinking, the okayness beneath the anxiety. You don't have to go searching for it, you just have to remember to descend below the surface, to drop into the quiet that's always present, to come home to yourself. And you can do this anytime. In the midst of a difficult day, in the middle of a mental spiral, when anxiety feels overwhelming, you can pause, breathe, and return. That capacity is yours now. It's always been yours, but now you know how to use it. The path forward isn't about reaching some final destination where you never struggle again. It's about continuing to practice, to return, to choose awareness and compassion over judgment and struggle. Not perfectly, you'll never do it perfectly, and that's not the goal, but consistently, with patience, with kindness towards yourself.
You're doing something courageous, even if it doesn't always feel that way. You're changing lifelong patterns. You're confronting fears that have shaped you. You're learning to trust yourself in new ways. You're choosing peace, even when anxiety feels safer. This takes tremendous courage, and you're showing it every time you practice, every time you return, every time you choose differently than you have before. You deserve peace, not because you've earned it through perfect practice or because you've overcome all your challenges, simply because you're alive, because you're human, because peace is your birthright. It's already yours. You're just learning to recognize it, to access it, to live from it more consistently. And as you continue this journey, know that you're not alone. Countless others are walking similar paths, learning to quiet their own minds, finding their own way home to inner peace. Your struggles are not unique to you. They're part of the shared human experience. And the peace you're discovering isn't just for you.
As you become more grounded, more present, more at peace, you naturally bring that quality into your relationships, your work, your life. You become a source of calm for others, not because you're trying to, but simply because of who you're becoming. This is the quiet on the other side, not the absence of all sound, but a fundamental stillness that holds everything, the thoughts that still come, the challenges that still arise, the full spectrum of human experience, a quietness that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect, a peace that's available even in the midst of difficulty. You've learned the way back to this quiet, and whenever you find yourself lost in the noise again, and you will, because that's part of being human, you'll know how to return. Again and again, for the rest of your life, you can always come home to yourself. The overthinking may never completely disappear, but it no longer has to define you, control you, or prevent you from experiencing the peace that's your true nature. You're free. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. And that freedom will deepen with every return, every practice, every moment you choose presence over the pull of anxious thinking. This is your journey. Walk it with patience. Walk it with self-compassion. Walk it with trust that you're exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn. And know that peace is always waiting for you, just beneath the surface, in the quiet space between your thoughts, in the stillness of this single, irreplaceable moment. You are enough. You always have been. Welcome home. Epilogue. On the other side of overthinking isn't a mind that never wanders, never worries, never questions. On the other side is you, whole, present, trusting yourself to meet whatever comes without needing to rehearse it first in your mind. You are not your thoughts. You never were. You are the vast, quiet awareness that holds them all, that watches them come and go, like weather passing through an endless sky. And in that awareness, there is peace. There has always been peace. You were just looking for it in the wrong place, in the resolution of your thoughts, rather than in the space that holds them. Come back to this space as many times as you need. It will always be here, waiting patiently for your return.